It begins with a hand, perhaps your own. Picture it for a moment. The knuckles pale and white, the muscles taut with a tremor of constant effort. This hand might be gripping the steering wheel in a line of unmoving traffic, the hum of collective frustration, an audible aura. It might be wrapped around a phone, the thumb mindlessly tracing patterns of light and information, seeking something it can never quite find. Or perhaps it is simply clenched in the quiet of a dark room, holding on to a worry, a resentment, a fear, as if holding it tightly enough will somehow grant control over it. This is the posture of our world, a quiet, desperate clenching. We are taught from our first breath to hold on to our ambitions, to our identities, to our possessions, to our youth. We are told to grip our plans with iron certainty, to protect our hearts with walls of defense, and to never, ever give up. We live in a state of perpetual struggle, a constant leaning into the wind, fighting an unseen current that pushes back against us. And we are so very tired. It is an exhaustion that sleep does not cure, a deep weariness of the soul that comes from this endless holding. We achieve the goal and immediately begin clinging to the fear of losing it. We find a moment of happiness and instantly begin mourning its inevitable departure. This struggle, this relentless clenching, is the source of the quiet hum of anxiety that underscores our days, the hollowness that can persist even in a life full of apparent success. But what if the path to peace, to genuine strength, does not lie in gripping tighter? What if the answer is found in the very act we have been taught to fear the most, the act of letting go? The word itself, surrender, feels like a failure in a world that worships victory. It sounds like giving up, like weakness, like defeat. But within the quiet corridors of ancient wisdom, particularly in the teachings of the Buddha, surrender is understood not as an admission of defeat, but as an act of profound intelligence, of ultimate courage. It is not surrendering to an enemy, but surrendering the fight itself. It is the wisdom to recognize which doors were never meant to be opened, which battles were never meant to be won, and which burdens were never meant to be carried. This is a journey into the heart of that wisdom. It is an exploration of letting go, not to lose ourselves, but to find ourselves, to discover that in releasing our grip on what we think we need, we create the space to receive what truly nourishes us. This is the path of unclenching the fist, finger by painful finger, to discover the peace and the potential that lies in an open hand. This is how we let go in order to grow. To truly begin the journey of letting go, we must first look unflinchingly at the force that keeps us bound. We must understand the nature of our own chains. The clenched fist does not clench itself. A force is applied, a mental and emotional energy that holds it tight. In the language of the Buddha, this fundamental force, this act of grasping, is called upadana. It is a word that can be translated as clinging, attachment, or grasping. It is not some abstract philosophical concept, but the most intimate of our activities, an action we are performing in nearly every moment of our waking lives. Upadana is the invisible architect of our inner prison. To dismantle the prison, we must first learn to see the bars. The foundation for understanding this clinging begins with a clear acceptance of a universal truth, what the Buddha called the first noble truth. This is the truth of dukkha. This ancient Pali word is often translated as suffering, but its meaning is far more subtle and profound. To think of it only as overt pain, like grief or physical injury, is to miss its pervasive nature. Dukkha is also the low-grade, chronic friction of life. It is the feeling of a wheel that is slightly off-center, creating a constant, barely perceptible vibration that unsettles everything. It is the inherent unsatisfactoriness of a life spent chasing fleeting pleasures and running from inevitable discomforts. It is the quiet disappointment that lingers even after we get what we wanted. It is the gap between the world as it is and the world as we demand it should be. This dukkha manifests in three primary ways. The first is the most obvious, the suffering of pain. Dukkha. This is the pain of a headache, the sorrow of loss, the anxiety of a difficult diagnosis. It is the unavoidable pain of the human condition. The second is the suffering of change, viparinama dukkha. This is a more subtle pain. It is the stress that arises because even pleasant things are impermanent. We get the promotion, and then we worry about keeping it. We are on a beautiful vacation, but a part of our mind is already sad that it will end. This is the suffering born from our resistance to the universal law of change. The third form is the most profound, sankhara dukkha. This is the suffering of conditioned existence itself. It is the underlying tension and unsatisfactoriness that comes from being a composite, dependent being in a constantly shifting world, clinging to things that have no solid, lasting essence. It is the background hum of incompleteness that drives us to ceaselessly seek for something more, something permanent, in a world where nothing is. Once we have seen this truth of dukkha, we are ready for the second noble truth, the one that reveals the cause. The cause of this pervasive dissatisfaction, the Buddha explained, is craving, or tanha, which literally means thirst. But it is the action that follows this thirst that truly forges our chains. That action is upadana, the clinging. The thirst itself is a natural impulse. The problem arises when we grasp at the object of our thirst, demanding that it quench us forever. Desire is a spark. Clinging is the act of gathering dry leaves, twigs, and logs and heaping them onto that spark until it becomes a raging, uncontrollable wildfire that consumes us. Clinging is the mental superglue that attaches our sense of well-being to a particular outcome, a particular feeling, a particular person, or a particular idea. When that thing changes, as all things do, we are not just disappointed, we feel that we ourselves are being torn apart. There is an old story from India that illustrates this perfectly. In a certain village, hunters had a clever way of catching monkeys. They would take a coconut or a gourd with a narrow opening and secure it firmly to the ground. Inside the coconut, they would place a handful of rice or some other treat that monkeys love. The opening of the coconut was just large enough for a monkey to slide its open hand in, but too small for it to pull out a closed fist. Sooner or later, a monkey would come along, smell the rice, and slip its hand inside to grasp the prize. But then, it would find itself trapped. In its mind, the problem is the coconut. It pulls and shrieks, fighting against the trap, growing more and more frantic. But the trap is not the coconut. The trap is the monkey's own clinging fist. The hunter can approach slowly, and the monkey will see the danger, but it will not let go of the rice. Its desire, its clinging to the prize, is so strong that it overrides its instinct for survival. All that is required for its freedom, at any moment, is to simply open its hand and let the rice go. We are that monkey. The world presents us with countless coconuts, filled with the rice of pleasant sensations, flattering ideas, and comforting beliefs. And we reach in, we grasp, and we wonder why we feel so trapped, so full of frantic struggle. We blame the trap, we blame the world, we blame others. But the secret to our freedom is, and always has been, in our own hand. Freedom is simply the willingness to unclench. This clinging, this upadana, operates in four main fields of our experience. The first is the most familiar, kamma, upadana, the clinging to sense pleasures. This is the grasping at anything that pleases our five senses. It is the addiction to the taste of a certain food, the need to hear praise, the endless search for a more beautiful sight, a more comfortable feeling. Our modern world is a grand temple dedicated to this form of clinging. It fuels our consumer culture, our social media addictions, our relentless belief that the next purchase, the next experience, the next relationship will finally deliver the lasting happiness we crave. But it never does, because the pleasure is fleeting by nature, and so we are left only with the residue of our clinging, a feeling of emptiness that sends us searching for the next fix. The second form of clinging is more subtle and often more destructive. Ditthi upadana, the clinging to views, opinions, and beliefs. This is the desperate need to be right. We attach our very identity to our political beliefs, our religious dogmas, our opinions about how the world should work. When these views are challenged, we do not feel that an idea is being questioned. We feel that we are being attacked. This clinging creates rigid, inflexible minds. It builds walls between people, families, and nations. It is the source of argument, conflict, and war. To release our grip on being right is terrifying for the ego, but it is the only way to open ourselves to wisdom, understanding, and genuine connection with others who see the world differently. The third form is Silabata Upadana, the clinging to rites, rituals, and rules. On the surface, this refers to the empty, superstitious adherence to religious ceremonies, believing that performing the ritual itself has magical power. But in a broader, secular sense, it is about clinging to the form instead of the essence. It is the person who follows a diet plan with rigid fanaticism but has lost all sense of joyful, intuitive eating. It is the executive who follows corporate procedures to the letter, even when they no longer make sense, losing sight of the company's actual mission. It is mistaking the map for the territory, believing that if we just follow the rules perfectly, we will be safe and rewarded. This form of clinging closes us off from spontaneity, creativity, and common sense. Finally, we come to the root of all clinging, the deepest and most challenging of all, Attavada Upadana, the clinging to the doctrine of a self. This is the grasping at the idea that inside this mind and body there is a permanent, solid, independent I, a fixed CEO in the headquarters of our being. This is the me who feels the pleasure, the me who holds the opinion, the me who performs the ritual. All other forms of clinging are done in service of protecting, pleasing, and perpetuating this illusion of a separate self. The entire project of Buddhist thought and practice is aimed at gently, patiently investigating this belief and seeing that what we call a self is not a solid thing, but an ever-changing process, a confluence of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. We do not need to destroy a self, only to let go of our fierce, desperate clinging to the idea of one. Understanding these forms of upadana reveals that our suffering is not a punishment inflicted upon us from the outside. It is the direct result of an inner action, a mental habit of grasping. It is something we are actively doing. This realization is not a cause for guilt, but for a profound sense of empowerment. If we are the ones who are clenching the fist, then we are also the ones who have the power to unclench it. We have identified the chains. We have seen how they are forged in the fires of our own mind. Now, we must begin the patient work of examining where these chains bind us most tightly in our daily lives. And there is no realm more heavily chained, more haunted by the ghosts of our grasping, than the territory we call the past. Of all the chains we forge for ourselves, none feel as heavy, nor as permanent, as those made from the metal of the past. The mind can become a haunted gallery, where we are the sole, captive visitor, forced to walk the same corridors day after day. In one room, we endlessly re-watch the flickering film of an old mistake, cringing at the same line of dialogue, feeling the same flush of shame. In another, we stare at a portrait of a person who hurt us, the colors of our resentment still vivid and wet, as if painted only yesterday. Even the beautiful rooms, the sunlit halls of past glories and happiness, can become a kind of prison, a standard against which the present moment always seems to fall short. We believe we are moving forward in time, but we are walking on a treadmill, our feet moving but our inner landscape remaining stubbornly, painfully the same. To let go, we must first turn and face these ghosts, not to fight them, but to understand that they are made of smoke, sustained only by the power of our own attention. The clinging to the past manifests in two great shadowed prisons, both of which prevent us from living in the only time that is real, now. The first, and most common, is the prison of regret and resentment. We carry our wounds with a strange kind of loyalty. An unkind word spoken to us a decade ago can be replayed in the mind with such clarity that it feels fresh, delivering its poison anew each time. A personal failure becomes not just an event that happened, but a core component of our identity, a heavy cloak we wear called, "I am the one who failed." This is not just passive remembering. It is an active process of recreation. Each time we dwell on the hurt, we are reactivating the same neural pathways, re-triggering the same cascade of stress hormones. We are, in effect, choosing to traumatize ourselves again and again. We are dutifully tending to a wound, ensuring it can never heal, believing that our vigilance is somehow justified, that our anger is a shield. But it is a shield that has grown so heavy it crushes us. The past is over. It cannot touch us. It is only our clinging to the story of the past that has the power to inflict pain in the present. The second prison is more subtle, and in some ways, more insidious. It is the prison of past glories. This is the clinging to the memory of a time when we were happier, more successful, more in love, or more alive. We build a museum to our own golden age, and we spend our days polishing the exhibits. The danger here is that it poisons our capacity to appreciate the present. A simple, quiet joy today is dismissed because it cannot compare to the ecstatic peak of a past vacation. A new relationship is viewed with skepticism because it doesn't have the same fire as a first love. By clinging to the highlight reel of yesterday, we render the reality of today dull and colorless. This is a refined form of dukkha, the suffering that comes from change. We are clinging to a pleasant memory, refusing to accept that its time has passed, and in doing so, we choke the life out of the new moments that are trying to be born. Whether we are bound by the iron chains of regret or the golden chains of nostalgia, the result is the same. We are not here. We are ghosts, haunting the ruins of a time that is gone forever. The radical wisdom of the Buddhist path offers a profound key to unlock these prison doors. This key is the direct, experiential understanding that the past is not real. It does not exist as a concrete place you can visit. It has no substance, no power of its own. The past exists only in one form, as a thought, appearing in the mind, in this present moment. When you remember a painful event, the event is not happening again. What is happening is that a thought, an image, a feeling is arising in the present. It is a mental event, as fleeting and insubstantial as the sound of a bird singing outside your window. We make the mistake of believing that our memories are accurate windows into a fixed reality called yesterday. They are not. They are reconstructions, stories we tell ourselves, colored by our current mood, beliefs, and attachments. Your life is like a boat moving across the water. The past is the wake that trails behind it. You can see the wake. It shows you where the boat has been, but you cannot turn the boat around and sail upon the wake. The wake has no substance. To try and live in the past is as futile as trying to sail on churning water that is already gone. The boat, your life, is always and only ever in the present moment. The wake is just a memory. Seeing this clearly is the beginning of freedom. There is a classic Zen story that illuminates this with beautiful simplicity. Two monks were on a long journey. They came to a river where the current was strong and the ford was treacherous. A young, beautifully dressed woman stood there, hesitant and afraid to cross. The senior monk, without a word, walked over, hoisted her onto his back, carried her through the rushing water, and set her down gently on the other side. He then continued on his way. The junior monk was aghast. He was scandalized. Monks were forbidden from touching women, let alone carrying them in such an intimate way. For the next several hours, as they walked in silence, the junior monk seethed. He replayed the scene in his mind, his indignation growing with every step. He imagined the criticism they would face, the damage to their reputation. His mind was a storm of judgment and righteousness. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he burst out, "Brother, how could you do that? You know, we are not permitted to touch a woman. It was a serious violation of our vows. The senior monk looked at him with a calm, kind expression. He paused for a moment and said softly, "Brother, I left that woman by the river hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" This story is a perfect mirror for our own minds. The woman represents any event from our past, an insult, a mistake, a loss, a disappointment. We encounter it, it happens, and then it is over. But we refuse to leave it on the riverbank. We hoist it onto our backs and continue to carry it, complaining about its weight, unaware that we are the ones who refuse to set it down. The practice of letting go of the past is the practice of consciously, deliberately setting the woman down. And the most powerful tool for this is the practice of forgiveness. Forgiveness, in the Buddhist sense, is not a moral imperative or a gift you give to someone who has wronged you. It is a profound act of self-liberation. To hold on to resentment and anger is, as the saying goes, like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. The only person being harmed is you. Forgiveness is the act of putting down the poison. It does not mean you condone what happened. It does not mean you must forget it, or even reconcile with the person. It simply means you make a conscious decision that you will no longer allow the past event to consume your present energy. It is a declaration of inner freedom. You cut the cord that binds your present peace to another's past actions. Even more challenging, perhaps, is the practice of forgiving ourselves. We are often our own harshest judges, our own most relentless tormentors. We carry the ghost of the person we were yesterday, the one who made the mistake, and we continue to punish that ghost, not realizing we are punishing the living person we are today. To forgive yourself is to extend the same quality of compassion and understanding to your own being that you might offer to a dear friend. It is to acknowledge the error, to feel the regret without being consumed by it, to learn the lesson it has to offer, and then to let it go. It is the acceptance of your own flawed, imperfect, beautiful humanity. It is the understanding that you did the best you could at the time with the understanding you had. Now you understand more. The act of self-forgiveness is the act of setting down the heavy bag of your own past identity and allowing yourself to be who you are now. This is not a single, grand gesture, but a moment-to-moment practice. When the ghost of a memory appears, and it will, you do not need to slam the door on it, nor do you need to invite it in for a long conversation. You can learn to simply acknowledge its presence with mindfulness. There is the memory of that argument. There is the feeling of regret. You note it as you would note a cloud passing in the sky. And then you gently, kindly, without judgment, return your attention to the anchor of the present moment, the feeling of your breath entering and leaving your body. Each time you do this, you weaken the chain. Each time you refuse to be hooked by the story, you reclaim a piece of your freedom. We have looked into the prison of the past and found the key, the realization that its walls are made only of thought. But the mind is a cunning architect. If it cannot trap us in what has already been, it will gladly build a new cage for us, one woven from the threads of what is yet to come. It is to this cage, the cage of anxiety and expectation, that we must now turn our attention. If the past is a heavy ghost we carry on our back, the future is a shimmering, treacherous mirage that we project onto the path ahead. Having liberated ourselves from the weight of what has been, we often walk directly into a different kind of trap, one built not of memory, but of imagination. This is the realm of anxiety, the land of what if. It is a state of being mentally and emotionally entangled with a time that has not yet arrived and may never come to be. It is the low-grade hum of dread that accompanies us through our days, the restless energy that prevents us from finding ease. Our minds, like tireless projectors, cast endless films onto the screen of tomorrow, and more often than not, these are films of catastrophe. We are living in a constant state of preparation for a disaster we ourselves have invented. To heal from this uniquely human affliction, we must learn the gentle art of letting go of the future. The primary way we cling to the future is through the tyranny of expectation. We are not content to simply move forward, meeting life as it comes. Instead, we draft elaborate and detailed blueprints for how reality must unfold. We write a rigid script for the perfect career path, the ideal romantic partner, the flawless vacation, the well-behaved children. We then hold this mental script up against the messy, unpredictable, and often chaotic flow of real life. And we are perpetually disappointed and aggrieved when reality fails to follow our direction. This clinging to expectations is a guaranteed formula for suffering. It is like trying to force a wild, meandering river into a narrow, perfectly straight concrete channel of our own design. The river of life, with its currents of impermanence and unpredictability, will always resist. Our effort to contain it, to control its flow, is the very source of our tension, our stress, and our profound exhaustion. We are not fighting the world. We are fighting our own picture of the world. This mental projection into the future, which we call worry, is a profound misuse of one of our greatest gifts, the imagination. The human capacity to create worlds in the mind, to envision possibilities, is the source of all art, invention, and progress. Yet, we so often turn this incredible faculty against ourselves. Worry is the imagination repurposed for self-torture. It is, in effect, a form of prayer for what we do not want. We use our creative power to construct detailed, vivid scenarios of failure, loss, embarrassment, and pain. We lie awake at night, not in peaceful silence, but as the captive audience in a private cinema, watching horror movies starring ourselves. The core insight of Buddhist psychology is that these imagined futures are just as insubstantial as our memories of the past. They are simply thoughts arising in the mind right now. When you are feeling sick with anxiety about a presentation next week, the suffering is not happening next week. The sweaty palms, the racing heart, the constricted feeling in your chestal of it is happening now, triggered by a mental image, a thought. We are choosing to suffer today for a potential difficulty tomorrow. We are paying interest on a debt we may never actually owe. Think of the life of a wise farmer. His existence is a masterclass in the balance between effort and surrender. The farmer does not sit passively in his house, hoping that rice will magically appear in his fields. That would be foolish. He engages in what Buddhism calls wise effort. He studies the seasons. He rises with the sun to prepare the soil, breaking up the hard earth, removing the stones. He carefully, mindfully, sows the seeds. He arranges for irrigation, diligently watering the young sprouts. He does everything that is within his sphere of influence. He puts in the work with intelligence and dedication. But there comes a point where his work ends and the work of the universe begins. Once the seeds are in the ground, he must let go. He cannot control the weather. He cannot command the sun to shine, nor the clouds to rain. He cannot negotiate with a sudden frost or a swarm of locusts. He cannot control the economic forces that will determine the price he gets at the market. To spend his days and nights in a state of high anxiety about these things would be a form of madness. It would burn away his energy, sour his spirit, and do absolutely nothing to change the outcome. The wise farmer learns the profound art of surrender. He does his part with all his skill and effort, and then he places the outcome into the hands of a reality larger than himself. He acts, and then he releases. This is the blueprint for a sane and peaceful life in an uncertain world. This points us toward a crucial, practical distinction: the difference between wise planning and anxious scheming. The wisdom traditions do not advocate for a life of aimless drifting. Wise planning is a healthy, present moment activity. You assess a situation, you look at your resources, you map out a course of action, and you prepare for reasonably foreseeable contingencies. This process is grounded, calm, and clear-headed. It empowers you to act effectively. Anxious scheming, by contrast, is a future-obsessed state of mind. It is the frantic, repetitive running through of endless scenarios. It is the attempt to nail down every variable, to control every possible outcome. It is emotionally charged with fear and desperately attached to one specific result. The practice, then, is to learn to plan wisely, and then to consciously and deliberately release your attachment to the fruits of your actions. It is to do your work, to send the arrow towards the target, and then to let go of the arrow. It no longer belongs to you. This requires the cultivation of trust, not a naive Pollyanna belief that everything will always turn out exactly as you wish, but a deeper, more resilient trust in your own ability to meet life as it unfolds. It is the confidence that whatever the outcome, whether it matches your preference or not, you will have the inner resources to handle it with grace and courage. Ultimately, this practice leads us to a radical reorientation toward life itself. It leads us to making peace with uncertainty. Our society teaches us to fear and pathologize uncertainty. We are supposed to have 5-year plans, career trajectories, and retirement portfolios. We are supposed to know. Buddhism, however, teaches that uncertainty is not a flaw in the system. It is the system. Impermanence, anicca, is the nature of all phenomenal existence. To resist uncertainty is as futile as resisting gravity. It is a constant struggle against the fundamental nature of reality. The alternative is to learn to embrace it, to relax into the not knowing. When you release the demand for a predictable, controllable future, something remarkable happens. A space opens up, a space for surprise, for serendipity, for possibility. If you don't know what's around the next corner, you are open to all possibilities, not just the limited ones your fearful mind can imagine. Letting go of the scripted life you thought you needed allows you to be fully available and responsive to the much more interesting and authentic life that is actually trying to unfold. You stop trying to be the rigid author of your life story and instead become its curious, attentive reader. So we have walked through the haunted house of the past, its corridors filled with ghosts of our own making. We have navigated the foggy, imagined minefield of the future, a landscape of our own fearful projections. We have seen that the chains of regret and the cages of anxiety are forged from the same insubstantial material, a thought. They derive their power not from reality, but from our clinging to them. This brings us to the most vital and pressing question of all. If we are not to dwell in the unreal past and not to be lost in the imagined future, then where are we supposed to live? Where is the firm ground upon which we can build a life of peace and wisdom? Where is our true home? The answer has been with us all along, closer than our own breath, waiting patiently for our return. It is the only place that has ever been real, the only time that truly exists. We have journeyed through the phantom worlds of the past and the future, seeing them for what they are, mental constructions, fueled by our clinging. The past is a gallery of ghosts, the future a theater of mirages. To live in either is to be absent from the only life we ever truly have. This leads us to the one vital question upon which all peace and sanity depend. If not there, then where? Where is our true home? The answer is at once shatteringly simple and profoundly deep. The only refuge, the only ground, the only reality is the present moment. It is not a fleeting point on a timeline, squeezed between a past that is gone and a future that is yet to be. It is a vast, boundless, and ever-available dimension of experience. It is here, it is now. And the practice of being human, the art of living, is simply the art of learning how to arrive here, fully, in this one precious moment. For most of our lives, we are time travelers, lost in thought. We eat our lunch while mentally replaying a conversation from this morning. We walk through a park while planning our evening. We talk to a loved one while simultaneously running a checklist of tomorrow's tasks. We are physically present, but our minds, our awareness, are elsewhere. We are never truly where we are. Imagine being invited to the most magnificent banquet ever prepared. The tables are laden with exquisite foods. The air is filled with beautiful music. The company is delightful. But you spend the entire evening looking at photographs of meals you have eaten in the past, or anxiously reading menus for meals you might eat in the future. The feast in front of you, the only real nourishment available, grows cold and untouched. This is how we live our lives. We are constantly abandoning the feast of the present moment for the stale bread of memory or the imaginary crumbs of fantasy. Coming home to the present is the act of putting down the photos and the menus and finally tasting the food that is right in front of us. To do this, we must learn to cultivate a quality of mind that in the Buddhist tradition is called sati, or mindfulness. Mindfulness is the capacity to pay attention, on purpose, in the present moment, non-judgmentally. Let us unpack that definition, for each part is a key that unlocks a door. First, paying attention. This means consciously choosing where to place our awareness, rather than letting it be hijacked by every stray thought, memory, or external distraction. It is an act of gentle but firm intention. Second, on purpose. We are not just randomly aware, but we are bringing a sense of purpose to our attention, the purpose of being fully present with our experience. Third, in the present moment. Our attention is not dwelling on the past or speculating about the future, but is anchored firmly in the here and now, in the raw data of this moment's reality. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, non-judgmentally. This is the radical component. It means observing what is happening, both inside and outside of ourselves, without immediately slapping a label on it of good or bad, right or wrong, like or dislike. It is a quality of receptive, open, and kind awareness. When a difficult thought arises, we don't condemn ourselves for having it. When a pleasant feeling is here, we don't immediately start clinging to it. We simply note it. Ah, this is what is here now. This non-judgmental stance is what creates the inner space for peace. It stops the endless cycle of reaction and resistance that is the source of so much of our stress. You allow reality to be as it is, at least for this one moment, and in that allowing, you find freedom. But how do we practice this? The mind is like a wild horse, accustomed to running free in the fields of past and future. We need an anchor, a post to which we can gently tether it. The most powerful and accessible anchor we have is the breath. Your breath is always with you. It is never in the past or in the future. It is always happening right now. It is the rhythm of life itself. You can begin this practice at this very moment. As you sit here, can you bring your attention to the feeling of your own breathing? You don't need to change it, control it, or improve it. Simply become aware of it. Feel the subtle sensation of the air entering your nostrils, perhaps cool and dry. Follow it as it fills your lungs. Notice the gentle rise of your chest or abdomen, and then feel the release, the letting go. As you exhale, the air perhaps warmer and more moist as it leaves. This is it. This is the practice. When your mind wanders, and it will, that is not a failure. The moment you realize your mind has wandered is a moment of perfect mindfulness. In that moment, you gently, without scolding yourself, guide your attention back to the anchor of the breath. Each time you do this, you are strengthening your muscle of attention. You are coming home, again and again. Once you are familiar with the anchor of the breath, you can begin to open your awareness to the full symphony of the present moment, as experienced through your senses. What can you hear right now? Beyond the sound of a voice, listen for the other sounds. The subtle hum of electronics, a car passing in the distance, the creak of a floorboard. Can you receive these sounds simply as vibrations, as pure sensory events, without needing to label or judge them? Now, bring your awareness to the sensations in your body. The feeling of pressure where your body makes contact with the surface you are on. The texture of your clothing against your skin. The ambient temperature of the air. Is there any tension in your jaw, your shoulders, your stomach? You don't need to fix it, just notice it. Allow your body to be a landscape of sensation that you can explore with gentle curiosity. This practice of grounding yourself in sensory reality is a powerful antidote to getting lost in abstract thought. It pulls you out of your head and into your life. The great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh spoke of this with profound simplicity through the act of washing dishes. He observed that we often wash the dishes in a rush, just to get them done so we can move on to the good part of our evening, like drinking a cup of tea. But if we are incapable of being present while washing the dishes, he taught, we will be equally incapable of being present while drinking the tea. While drinking the tea, our mind will already be on to the next thing, and the next. We will race through our entire lives, never actually living any of it. The solution, he said, is to wash the dishes for the sake of washing the dishes, to be fully present with the task, to feel the warmth of the water on your hands, to appreciate the color and shape of the plates, to smell the scent of the soap. In that moment, the act of washing dishes becomes a meditation. It becomes an act of being fully alive. This principle can be extended to every single activity of our lives. We can walk just to walk, feeling the contact of our feet on the earth. We can eat just to eat, truly tasting our food. We can listen just to listen, offering someone the gift of our full, undivided attention. Every moment, no matter how mundane, becomes an opportunity to wake up. This leads to a crucial understanding. The peace offered by mindfulness is not a promise of a future life free from problems. Difficulties will still arise. Pain, loss, and disappointment are inescapable parts of the human condition. The promise is something far more powerful and realistic, the ability to be at peace in the midst of problems. It is the discovery of an inner refuge that is untouched by the storms of life. When a wave of sadness or anger comes, instead of being immediately swept away by it, you can learn to stand firm on the shore of your awareness and watch it. You can feel its energy, its texture, its power, without becoming it. You see that it is a temporary weather pattern in the vast sky of your mind. It arises, it stays for a while, and it passes. Peace is not the absence of waves, but the capacity to surf them. The present moment is our only true sanctuary. It is the ground of our being, the source of all sanity and wisdom. It is here that we are truly alive. Yet, as we make the effort to rest here, we become acutely aware of a persistent inner voice, a commentator, a judge, a restless entity that constantly pulls us back into the labyrinth of thought that evaluates our every experience, that tells us we are not doing it right. This is the voice of the I, the ego. Our sincere attempt to be present inevitably brings us face to face with this master of distraction. Therefore, to truly establish ourselves in the refuge of the now, we must turn our attention to this sense of self, to understand its nature, and to learn to release our grip on it. As we attempt to rest in the quiet sanctuary of the present moment, we inevitably meet the saboteur. We encounter the restless narrator, the incessant inner voice that comments, judges, and plans. It is the voice that says, I am good at this, or I am failing at this. It is the one who feels slighted by a sideways glance, the one who swells with pride at a word of praise. It is the central character in the epic drama of our life, the one who feels so solid, so important, and so very real. In the West, we might call this the ego. In the Buddhist tradition, it is seen as the root of all our clinging, the master illusionist, the ghost in the machine that we have mistaken for the machine's operator. To truly find freedom, we must have the courage to turn our attention toward this I, to investigate its nature, and to gently, patiently learn to let go of our identification with it. It is crucial to understand that the ego in this context is not the same as the healthy sense of self or self-esteem spoken of in Western psychology. Buddhism does not advocate for self-hatred or the destruction of a functioning personality. Instead, it invites us to see that what we call I is not a solid, continuous entity, but a construct, an assembly. It is a story we have been telling ourselves since we were children. a story woven from a bundle of changing components. This bundle is sometimes called the 5 aggregates, or skandhas. The first is our physical body. The ego says, "This body is me." The second is our feelings and sensations, pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. The ego says, "I am happy," or "I am sad," claiming ownership of these fleeting emotional states. The third is our perceptions, the way our mind labels everything it encounters: tree, car, good, bad. The ego identifies with these labels, believing its version of reality is reality itself. The fourth is our mental formations, the vast and turbulent world of our thoughts, beliefs, opinions, biases, and intentions. This is the very heart of the ego's narrative. And the fifth is consciousness itself, the simple knowing quality of the mind, which the ego mistakenly claims as its own personal property, my consciousness. The story of me is simply the habit of identifying with this ever-changing collection of processes. Imagine a corporation called Me, Incorporated. It has a name, a public brand, our personality, a history of profits and losses, our successes and failures, and a set of corporate policies, our beliefs and opinions. We are the CEO, and we spend all our energy promoting and defending this corporation. But if you were to look for the actual, solid corporation, you wouldn't find it. You would only find buildings, employees, processes, and paperwork. In the same way, if you look for the solid, unchanging me, you will not find it. You will only find a body, feelings, thoughts, and sensations, all of them in a constant state of flux. The ego is the mistaken belief that the temporary bundle is a permanent, solid thing. And because this ego is a fragile illusion, it lives in a state of profound and perpetual anxiety. A truly existing thing does not need to constantly prove its existence, but the ego does. Its entire life is a campaign of self-validation, which is why it is the source of so much of our suffering. The ego's primary activity is comparison. It cannot exist in a vacuum. It defines itself by measuring itself against others. Am I smarter than her? Am I as successful as him? Is my house bigger? Is my suffering more profound? This constant comparison is the fertile ground from which jealousy, envy, pride, and insecurity grow. Because it is insecure, the ego is also chronically defensive. It takes everything personally. A disagreement over politics is not a difference of ideas. It is a fundamental threat to the ego's identity. A piece of criticism at work is not feedback. It is an assault on our core worth. This defensiveness creates walls, arguments, and a deep sense of separation from others. And finally, the ego is defined by its insatiable craving. It is a bottomless pit of need. It needs attention, praise, success, and validation from the outside world to feel real, even for a moment. But like drinking salt water to quench thirst, this external validation only makes the underlying thirst more intense. The life of the ego is an exhausting, stressful, and ultimately futile performance. The most radical and liberating teaching of the Buddha is the doctrine of anatta, or no self. This teaching is frequently misunderstood as frightening or nihilistic, but it is the very key to our freedom. Anatta does not mean that you do not exist. You are clearly here, reading, thinking, breathing. What it means is that within this experience, there is no permanent, independent, unchanging self to be found. You are not a static noun. You are a dynamic verb. Think of a river. We give it a name, like the Mississippi. But what is it? It is a continuous process of flowing water, silt, and energy. You can never point to a single solid river thing because it is always changing, always in motion. The word river is a convenient label for a process. In the same way, the word me is a convenient label for the continuous, ever-changing process of thinking, feeling, sensing, and being aware. You are not a thing. You are a happening. You are not a noun. You are a process of being. When we truly begin to grasp this, the entire structure of our anxiety begins to crumble. If there is no fixed, solid self to defend, who is it that is being threatened? If there is no permanent entity to aggrandize, what is the point of pride? The teaching of no self is not a negation of our existence, but an invitation to relax into it, to stop defending a phantom, and to participate in the joyful, spontaneous dance of life. There is a famous Zen koan that probes this very point. A koan is not a logical riddle to be solved, but a question designed to exhaust the conceptual mind and point to a deeper truth. The koan is, "Show me your original face, the face you had before your parents were born." This question asks us to look past everything we think we are. It asks us to peel back all the layers of our constructed identity. Your name, that was given to you. Your body, it came from your parents. Your personality, your beliefs, your memories, your accomplishments, your failures. All of these were acquired in this lifetime. The koan pushes us to inquire, what is left when you strip all of that away? What is the fundamental awareness that exists prior to the story of me? The question itself, when held in the mind, acts like a solvent, dissolving the rigid structures of the ego. It doesn't point to an answer in words, but to the silent, spacious, and aware presence that has been here all along, the original face of our true nature. So how do we practice letting go of this ego? It is not a dramatic act of self-annihilation. It is a gentle and continuous practice of disidentification. The first step is to simply observe the ego in action without judgment. Watch it as you would watch a character in a play. Notice the moments when the voice of I, me, mine arises with its demands, its fears, and its opinions. See the impulse to defend a point of view, the subtle seeking of praise, the pang of jealousy. By seeing these patterns, you are already creating a space between them and your awareness. You are proving to yourself that you are the one who sees the ego, therefore you cannot be the ego. The second step is to gradually stop feeding it. We feed the ego every time we believe its stories and act on its impulses. When the urge to win an argument arises, can you simply let it be without speaking the cutting remark? When you feel the need to boast, can you simply notice that feeling of lack and stay silent? Each time you decline to act out the ego's script, you weaken its power. You are gently withdrawing the fuel from the fire. This is a practice of profound humility, of choosing peace over being right, of choosing connection over separation. It is the understanding that true strength lies not in a fortified ego, but in a soft, open, and undefended heart. This ego, this illusory sense of a separate self, is the master clinger we have been searching for. It is the one who grasps at pleasure, who recoils from pain, who carries the past, and who fears the future. And nothing reinforces the ego's sense of reality more powerfully than the things it believes it owns, the things it can point to and declare, "This is mine." The ego builds its fortress with the bricks of possession. Its identity is inextricably linked to its acquisitions. Therefore, to continue on this path of unclenching the fist, we must now turn our gaze to our relationship with the world of things, to the powerful and pervasive illusion of ownership that gives the ego its most tangible sense of reality. Having investigated the illusory nature of the ego, this constructed I that haunts our inner world, we must now turn to the realm where it seeks to make itself most solid and real. The ego, in its desperate quest for substance and security, reaches out and attaches itself to the world of things. It builds its nest from the twigs of acquisition and lines it with the soft feathers of ownership. The statement, "This is mine," is one of the most powerful and reinforcing pronouncements the ego can make. It draws a line between the self and the world and defines the self by what it possesses. Our modern culture has been built almost entirely upon this single premise. It is a vast and glittering superstructure designed to convince us that we can purchase our way to a stable and happy identity. Materialism is not simply about enjoying nice things. It is a spiritual hunger being fed with the wrong kind of food, a deep thirst being quenched with salt water. The promise of materialism is seductive and endlessly repeated. It whispers to us from every screen and billboard. It tells a simple story. Happiness is just one purchase away. This new car will bring you freedom and admiration. This expensive watch will signal your success and worth. This fashionable outfit will make you desirable and complete. This story creates a subtle but painful tension in the mind, a sense of lack, a feeling that our current life is not quite good enough. And so we chase. We work, we strive, we acquire the object of our desire. And for a moment, there is a flicker of pleasure. But it is not the pleasure of the thing itself. It is primarily the pleasure of relief, the momentary cessation of the pain of wanting. Then, with shocking speed, the magic fades. The new car becomes just a car, a means of transportation that gets stuck in traffic. The watch becomes a simple device for telling time. The outfit hangs in a closet with all the others. The object becomes ordinary, and the mind, the hungry ghost, soon finds a new object, a new promise, and the entire cycle begins again. This is the hedonic treadmill. It is a chase with no finish line, a perfect, real-world demonstration of dukkha. The more we feed the hunger for things, the more the hunger grows. The promised land of lasting satisfaction is a mirage that recedes as we approach it. It is here that the wisdom of the Buddha offers a profound clarification. Buddhism does not condemn wealth or comfort. There is no inherent virtue in poverty, just as there is no inherent sin in riches. The Buddha's teaching was not a form of social or economic policy. It was a science of the mind. The problem, he taught, is never the external object. The problem is always the inner state of clinging. The issue is not the money in your bank account, but the attachment in your heart. A person can live in a palace, surrounded by beautiful things, and yet have a mind that is spacious, generous, and non-attached. Another can live in a simple hut with few possessions and be utterly consumed by envy and the desire for what they do not have. The focus is always on the quality of the mind. Imagine you are holding a flawless, priceless diamond. You can hold it in your open palm. You can appreciate its beauty, the way it catches the light, its coolness against your skin. This is enjoyment. But attachment is when you clench your fist around it. Your muscles tense. Your mind fills with the fear of it being stolen, of it being lost, of it being damaged. Your identity becomes fused with the diamond. You are no longer a person holding a diamond. You are a diamond owner. The source of all the tension, all the fear, is not in the diamond. It is in the clenched fist. Materialism is a life lived with a clenched fist. There is no more powerful illustration of this principle than the life story of the Buddha himself. He was born a prince, Siddhartha Gautama, into a world of almost unimaginable luxury. His father, the king, determined to shield him from all forms of human suffering, surrounded him with every pleasure imaginable. He had palaces for every season of the year. He was draped in the finest silks, entertained by the most beautiful dancers, and fed the most exquisite foods. He had from birth everything that our modern consumer culture tells us will lead to ultimate happiness. He was living the dream. Yet, within this gilded cage, he felt a deep and unsettling disquiet. He experienced a profound sense of sankhara dukkha, that underlying unsatisfactoriness of even the most pleasant conditioned existence. He sensed that something was missing, that no amount of sensory pleasure could touch the deepest questions of the human heart. This disquiet led him to venture outside the palace walls, where his father's protections could not follow. There, for the first time, he encountered what have come to be known as the four heavenly messengers. He saw an old man and learned of the inevitability of aging. He saw a sick person and learned of the reality of disease. He saw a corpse being carried to cremation and was confronted with the stark, unavoidable fact of death. These sights shattered the illusion that happiness could be secured through pleasure and possessions. All of it was subject to decay and loss. But then he saw the fourth messenger, a wandering ascetic, a renunciate who had no possessions save for a simple robe and a begging bowl, yet whose face shone with a profound and unshakable serenity. In that moment, the prince understood. The path to true freedom did not lie in adding more to his life, but in letting go. His decision to leave the palace was not a rejection of things because they were bad, but a realization that they were insufficient. He walked away from a kingdom to find a truth that was infinitely more valuable. The enduring image of the Buddha, sitting in peaceful meditation under the Bodhi tree, is the ultimate testament to this. He possessed nothing, yet he had everything. His wealth was an inner peace that could not be bought, sold, or stolen. This points us toward a practice, a way of living that consciously dismantles our attachment to the material world. It is the practice of simplicity and contentment. This does not necessarily mean living a life of extreme austerity, but it does mean cultivating a different relationship with our things. It begins with mindful consumption. Before you make a purchase, you can create a sacred pause. You can ask yourself, am I buying this because of a genuine need, or am I acting on an impulse, trying to soothe an anxiety or fill a sense of emptiness? This simple question can break the reactive spell of consumerism. We can also engage in decluttering as a spiritual practice. Going through our closets, our garages, our storage spaces is not just a chore. It is an active meditation on attachment. As you hold an object you haven't used in 5 years, you can feel the ego's clinging. But I might need it someday. But it was a gift. But I paid good money for it. The act of consciously letting that object go, of donating it or giving it away, is a physical rehearsal for letting go of our mental burdens. It creates space, not just in our homes, but in our minds. The most powerful antidote to the poison of clinging is the practice of dana, the Pali word for generosity or giving. When we grasp and accumulate, our world shrinks down to the size of our ego, to I, me, mine. When we give freely, without expecting anything in return, our world expands. The act of giving directly weakens the ego's sense of ownership. We experience that our well-being can actually increase by having less. The joy that arises from a genuine act of generosity is a far more stable and nourishing happiness than the fleeting thrill of acquisition. It connects us to others and reminds us that we are part of an interdependent web of life. Our true wealth lies not in what we manage to keep for ourselves, but in what we are able to joyfully give away. This entire journey leads us to a radical redefinition of what it means to be wealthy. True wealth is not found in a portfolio or a property list. True wealth is a mind that is content with little. It is the freedom from the exhausting cycle of wanting. It is having enough time to be still, to connect with loved ones, to walk in nature. It is the unshakable inner confidence that your worth as a human being is not tied to your possessions. It is the discovery of an inner wellspring of peace and contentment that is not dependent on external circumstances. It is the realization that the greatest treasures in life, love, wisdom, compassion, and freedom are not things that can be owned at all. Letting go of our fierce grip on the material world is a profound and liberating step. It frees up immense resources of time, energy, and attention. But as we unburden ourselves from the weight of our possessions, we may find that there are other, more intangible burdens that we cling to with even greater ferocity. We carry emotional baggage from years ago as if it were precious. And perhaps the heaviest, most toxic, and most burning of all these burdens is the coal of anger and resentment we hold in our hearts. To continue on our path to freedom, we must now turn our attention to this inner fire and learn the methods by which we can allow its destructive heat to finally cool. As we release our grip on the tangible world of possessions, we discover that the most stubborn attachments are often the most invisible. We cling to our emotional burdens with a fierce and loyal tenacity, carrying them across the landscape of our lives. Of all these burdens, none is as caustic, as heavy, or as self-destructive as the smoldering coal of anger and its hardened, time-worn form, resentment. Anger is a fire. We light it in our hearts, believing its heat will somehow harm another, yet we are the one who is consumed by its flames. It is a poison we drink, secretly hoping it will fell our enemy, while it corrodes our own soul from within. To find peace, we must learn to be our own firefighters, to approach this powerful energy not with more aggression, but with the cooling waters of wisdom and compassion. Anger, in its raw form, is a powerful evolutionary energy, a biological response to a perceived threat or injustice. It is part of the fight in our fight-or-flight system. When we feel anger, our body is flooded with the stress hormones adrenaline and cortisol. Our heart rate increases, our muscles tense, our breathing becomes shallow, and our thinking narrows to focus solely on the source of the threat. This is an incredibly taxing state for the body to be in. While it may be useful for a brief, life-threatening encounter, the way we experience anger in the modern world is often as a chronic, low-grade resentment. We hold on to grudges for days, weeks, or even years. This means we are keeping our bodies in a prolonged state of emergency, simmering in a toxic bath of our own stress chemicals. This chronic anger contributes to a host of physical and mental ailments, from heart disease and high blood pressure to depression and chronic anxiety. It steals our joy, it clouds our judgment, and it poisons the well of our relationships. It is a profound state of suffering, a fire that, when held onto, burns away the very possibility of inner peace. It is here that we encounter a critical misunderstanding that prevents many from even attempting to let go. We believe that letting go of our anger is the same as condoning the harmful action that caused it. We feel that our anger is a righteous shield, a testament to the fact that we were wronged, and that to release it would be to let the other person get away with it, to become a passive victim. This is a profound misreading of the practice. Letting go of anger is not a favor you do for the person who hurt you. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. It is a declaration of your own sovereignty. It is to look at the situation clearly and say, "What you did was wrong. It caused harm, but I refuse to allow your past action to determine the quality of my present mind. I refuse to continue drinking poison because of your mistake. I am taking my peace back, not for your sake, but for mine." You can set firm boundaries. You can seek justice. You can remove yourself from harmful situations. All of these can be done with a clear mind and a calm heart. Anger is not a prerequisite for wise action. In fact, it is often the greatest obstacle to it. The Buddha told a story that perfectly illustrates this power of choice. One day, a man who was deeply opposed to the Buddha's teachings came to see him. He stood before the Buddha and unleashed a torrent of vile, abusive language. He insulted his family, his character, his teachings, his appearance. The Buddha listened in perfect silence, his expression calm and unwavering. He simply sat and received the man's rage without any reaction. When the man had finally exhausted himself and run out of insults, he fell silent, confused by the Buddha's placid demeanor. After a long pause, the Buddha spoke softly, asking, "My friend, if you buy a gift for someone, and that person declines to accept the gift, to whom does the gift then belong?" The angry man, taken aback, replied, "Well, it would belong to me, the one who bought it." The Buddha nodded gently and said, "Exactly so, and so it is with your anger. You have come here and offered me this gift of your insults and your rage, but I decline to accept it. It is still yours. Please take it with you." This story is a revolutionary teaching on emotional freedom. It reveals that we have a choice. Another person's anger, their negativity, their criticism, is their own creation. It belongs to them. They can offer it to us, but we are under no obligation to accept it. When we react with our own anger, when we become defensive and enraged, we have, in effect, accepted their toxic gift. We have allowed their inner state to become our own. We have given them the power to control our peace. To let go of anger is to learn the simple, profound art of politely declining the gift. It is to protect our own inner space, to recognize that another person's poison does not have to become ours. The direct antidote to the fire of anger and hatred is the cultivation of its opposite qualities. Metta, which means loving, kindness, and karuna, which means compassion. These are not just sentimental feelings. They are powerful mental trainings that rewire the heart. The practice of metta must always begin with ourselves. It is incredibly difficult to feel genuine kindness for others if we are filled with self-loathing and criticism. So, in meditation, we can gently repeat phrases of well-wishing for our own being. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. May I be healthy and strong. May I be happy and content. May I live with ease. At first, this might feel mechanical or even untrue, but with patient repetition, these words begin to permeate the heart, softening the hard soil of self-judgment. Once we have established a foundation of kindness for ourselves, we can begin to expand the circle. We bring to mind a dear friend or loved one, someone for whom it is easy to feel affection, and we extend the same wishes to them. May you be safe. May you be happy. Then, we expand the circle further to include a neutral person, someone we see in our daily life but have no strong feelings about. And then comes the most transformative step. We bring to mind the difficult person, the one who is the object of our anger. This is not about forcing ourselves to feel a gush of affection. It is a cognitive shift. We look at this person and recognize that they too are a suffering being. Their harmful actions are born from their own confusion, their own pain, their own delusion. From this place of understanding, we can genuinely wish for them to be free from the very suffering that causes them to harm others. We can wish for them to find the peace we seek for ourselves. This is the practice of compassion, karuna, the wish for a being to be free from suffering. When we see the person who hurt us not as a monster, but as a wounded, suffering human, the hard knot of our anger begins to dissolve. Alongside this practice of cultivating kindness, we can use the tool of mindfulness to depersonalize the experience of anger itself. When the fiery energy of anger arises, instead of immediately identifying with it and saying, "I am so angry," we can learn to observe it as an impersonal event. We can note in our minds, anger is present. We can then turn our attention to its physical manifestations. Where is it in the body? Is there a tightness in the chest, a heat in the face, clenched fists, a churning in the stomach? By observing anger as a set of temporary physical and mental sensations, we create a space between ourselves and the emotion. We see it for what it is, a powerful but impermanent energy passing through our system. We are the sky, and the anger is a dark storm cloud. The cloud is not the sky. By not feeding it with the fuel of our stories, he always does this. She has no right. We allow the storm to pass on its own. We learn that we don't have to be the victim of our own anger. We can become its calm and curious observer. Letting go of anger is like finally setting down a heavy, burning stone that we have been carrying for miles. It is a supreme act of compassion for ourselves. And this inner fire, this intense emotional energy, most often erupts within the crucible of our connections to other people. Our anger is so often entangled with our frustrated expectations, our perceived betrayals, and our painful interactions. Therefore, as we learn to cool the flames of our own heart, it is natural that we now turn our attention to the very relationships that so often provide the fuel for these fires, and to the challenging but necessary wisdom of knowing when and how to let them go. As we learn to cool the inner fires of our own anger, we inevitably turn our gaze toward the landscapes where these fires most often ignite, the landscapes of our relationships. Human beings are wired for connection. We are not solitary islands, but beings in a vast, interdependent web of existence. Our relationships are the soil in which we grow. They are meant to be a source of nourishment, support, and joy. Yet, sometimes, the very connections that should sustain us become toxic. The soil becomes poisoned, and instead of being nourished, we find ourselves feeling drained, diminished, and perpetually unsettled. Learning to navigate these difficult relational waters and having the courage to let go when necessary is not an act of failure or selfishness. It is a profound act of wisdom and self-compassion. A toxic relationship is not always a dramatic, explosive affair. More often, it is a slow, subtle erosion of our well-being, a quiet poisoning of our spirit. The first sign is often a consistent feeling of depletion. After interacting with this person, do you feel energized and uplifted, or do you feel exhausted, smaller, and drained of your life force? It is as if they are an energetic black hole, and you are slowly being pulled apart. Another sign is a chronic lack of respect. This can manifest as constant criticism, dismissive comments about your feelings and ideas, subtle belittling disguised as jokes, or a consistent refusal to listen. You feel unseen, unheard, and invalidated. Often, there is an element of control or manipulation. This may not be overt domination, but the use of guilt, emotional blackmail, or passive aggression to get you to do what they want. You find yourself altering your behavior not out of love, but out of a desire to avoid a negative reaction. This leads to a state of hypervigilance, of constantly walking on eggshells, of censoring your own thoughts and feelings to keep the peace. The relationship becomes a performance, and you lose touch with your authentic self. Given these painful realities, one of the deepest human mysteries is why we so often choose to stay. Why do we cling so fiercely to connections that cause us so much suffering? The reasons are complex and deeply rooted in the ego's greatest fears. The most powerful glue is the fear of loneliness. The ego, our constructed sense of self, dreads dissolution, and being alone can feel like a small death. It tells us that even a painful, dysfunctional connection is better than the terrifying void of no connection at all. We also stay out of a misplaced sense of guilt or obligation. We may feel responsible for the other person's happiness, believing that if we leave, they will fall apart. This is especially true in family relationships, where we feel bound by duty and history. We carry the weight of their well-being on our shoulders, a burden we were never meant to bear. And perhaps the most potent and addictive glue of all is the false hope that the other person will change. We are not in a relationship with the person as they actually are, in this present moment. We are in a relationship with their potential. We cling to a fantasy of who they could be if only they would stop drinking, if only they would get help for their anger, if only they would finally see our worth. We stay for the memory of the good times, hoping they will return, investing our present happiness in a future that may never arrive. This clinging to potential is a profound source of suffering because it forces us to constantly deny the reality that is right in front of us. We are watering a dead plant, hoping for a blossom. To let go of a toxic relationship, then, is not necessarily a single dramatic act of cutting all ties, although sometimes that is the most compassionate choice. It is, first and foremost, an internal shift in our own mind. The most fundamental act of letting go is to release the exhausting project of trying to change the other person. You must, for your own sanity, accept that you are powerless over their choices, their addictions, their emotional state. You are not their therapist, their savior, or their warden. You can offer love and support, but you cannot walk their path for them. The second act of letting go is to release your need for their approval or validation. You stop looking to them to affirm your worth. You learn to source your self-esteem from within, from your own core values and integrity. And finally, you let go of the story. You stop replaying the past, and you stop fantasizing about the future. You practice the courage to see the relationship as it is, right now. Sometimes, when this internal letting go happens, the dynamic can shift. When you stop playing your part in the dysfunctional dance, the dance itself must change. But often, this newfound clarity reveals that physical or emotional distance is the only sane and healthy path forward. There is a powerful image that captures this dynamic. Imagine seeing a person holding a burning hot coal in their bare hand, their flesh sizzling, their face contorted in agony. You ask them, "Why are you doing that? Put it down." And they reply, "I have to hold on to this. I am trying to keep that person over there warm." The logic is absurd, yet this is precisely what we are doing when we remain in a relationship that is burning us, under the illusion that our suffering is somehow helping or serving the other person. The painful truth is that the heat never reaches them. We are the only one being burned. Letting go of the hot coal is not an act of aggression. It is a necessary, compassionate, and intelligent act of self-preservation. This leads to the practice of cultivating compassion with boundaries. These two concepts are not opposites. They are the two essential wings of a healthy spiritual life. Compassion is the soft front. It is the ability to look at the difficult person in our life and see their own suffering. We can understand from a distance that their hurtful behavior is not truly about us. It is the product of their own fear, their own insecurity, their own unhealed wounds. We can wish for them to be free from the inner turmoil that causes them to create turmoil for others. This compassionate view protects us from the poison of hatred. But we also need a strong back. This is the practice of setting firm, clear boundaries. Boundaries are not walls to keep others out. They are fences that protect the sacred garden of our own inner peace. A boundary is a clear, calm statement of what is and is not acceptable. I am not willing to be spoken to in that tone of voice. I love you, but I will not participate in gossip. I am available to meet for 1 hour. Setting a boundary is not an act of punishment. It is an act of respect, respect for ourselves and respect for the other person, as it teaches them how we need to be treated in order to remain in connection. Learning to untangle ourselves from relationships that harm us is a profound act of choosing our own well-being. It is the choice of peace over chaos, of authenticity over performance. This process of disentanglement, however, is rarely smooth. It often involves conflict and disagreement. It forces us to confront the other person's narrative, and in doing so, we are brought face to face with one of the ego's most cherished and deeply held attachments, the powerful, all-consuming need to be seen as right. This clinging to our own opinions, our own version of the story, is a primary source of friction not just in our difficult relationships, but in all of our interactions with the world. Therefore, to continue our journey toward inner freedom, our path must now lead us even deeper into the subtle workings of the mind, to examine and release the powerful grip of our own views. As we disentangle ourselves from the thorny vines of difficult relationships, we begin to see a recurring pattern, a common thread that runs through nearly all our conflicts, both large and small. It is a subtle but ferocious energy, a quiet insistence that pulses beneath the surface of our disagreements. It is the powerful, all-consuming, and deeply human need to be right. From a trivial domestic squabble about the proper way to load a dishwasher, to the intractable political and religious conflicts that scar our globe, the fuel for the fire is so often the same. My version of reality is correct, and yours is wrong. This attachment to our own views, called Ditthi Upadana in the Buddhist tradition, is one of the most tenacious and deceptive forms of clinging. To unlatch its grip is to discover a new and profound dimension of wisdom, peace, and humility. The need to be right is not a noble pursuit of objective truth. It is one of the ego's most clever and effective strategies for survival. As we have seen, the ego is an insecure and illusory construct, constantly seeking validation to shore up its fragile sense of existence. Our beliefs, opinions, and worldviews are the very architecture of this ego identity. We do not simply have opinions, we believe that we are our opinions. Our identification with a political party, a social cause, or a particular philosophy becomes a core part of who we believe ourselves to be. Therefore, when someone challenges our viewpoint, it does not feel like a dispassionate debate about ideas. It feels like a personal attack, a threat to our very identity. Our fight-or-flight system kicks in. and we defend our opinion as if we are defending our own life. This attachment is further cemented by the ego's craving for certainty. We live in a world that is complex, ambiguous, and fundamentally unpredictable. This uncertainty is frightening to the ego, which desires control and solid ground. Our beliefs provide a comforting illusion of order. They act as a simple map for a messy territory, neatly dividing the world into right and wrong, good and bad, us and them. This map makes us feel safe. It makes us feel like we understand. To admit that our map might be flawed or incomplete is to voluntarily step back into the uncomfortable but ultimately more truthful ground of not knowing. Furthermore, there is a certain seductive pleasure in feeling right. It gives us a hit of righteousness, a feeling of moral or intellectual superiority that is a potent food for the ego. This is why arguments can be so addictive. We are not just debating facts. We are often unconsciously jockeying for the superior position, a contest the ego is desperate to win. While we imagine that our firmly held beliefs are a fortress that protects us, they are, in reality, a prison that confines us. Clinging to our views prevents us from learning and growing. If you are convinced that you already know the answer, you are incapable of hearing new information. Your mind is no longer a spacious field for inquiry. It is a locked room. You engage in confirmation bias, unconsciously seeking out information that supports your existing beliefs while dismissing or discrediting anything that challenges them. The walls of your prison become thicker and the windows smaller. More tragically, clinging to views is the primary engine of human separation. It allows us to dehumanize others. We no longer see a complex human being with their own life story, hopes, and fears. We see a label, a liberal, a conservative, a foreigner, a heretic. This labeling makes it easy to dismiss them, to hold them in contempt, and in the most extreme cases, to justify harming them. It is the root of prejudice, polarization, and war. There is an ancient Indian parable that illuminates this human predicament with perfect clarity. It is the story of the blind men and the elephant. A king brought an elephant to his palace and invited a group of men who had been blind from birth to experience it. The first man reached out and touched the elephant's thick, sturdy leg. "I see," he said. "An elephant is like a great pillar." The second man touched the elephant's tail. "No," he argued. "An elephant is like a rope." A third man was led to the trunk, and he proclaimed, "You are both wrong. An elephant is like a thick snake." Another touched the wide, flat ear, and was certain an elephant was like a large fan. The man who felt the elephant's broadside insisted it was like a solid wall, and the one who touched the tusk was convinced it was like a cold, smooth spear. Each man was absolutely certain of his own direct experience, and because their experiences were so different, a furious argument broke out. Each accused the others of being either liars or fools, and soon they were exchanging blows, each one defending his own partial truth. The lesson of this parable is profound. The elephant represents the whole of reality, the immense and complex truth of any given situation. We, with our limited senses, our personal histories, and our cultural conditioning, are the blind men. We each touch one small part of the elephant and mistake it for the whole. Our cherished view is the leg, the tail, or the tusk. The tragedy is not that our experience is wrong. The man who touched the leg did indeed experience something like a pillar. The tragedy is our arrogant insistence that our limited, partial experience is the complete and only truth. Wisdom, the story teaches, begins with the deep, humble realization that we are all blind. It is the understanding that every person's perspective contains a grain of truth based on their unique experience, and that no single perspective can ever encompass the whole. The only way to get a fuller picture of the elephant is to stop shouting and to start listening respectfully and curiously to what the other blind men have experienced. This leads us to the antidote for clinging to views, the cultivation of a mind of not knowing. This is not a state of ignorance or indecisiveness. It is the active, intelligent, and courageous release of the need for absolute certainty. It is the replacement of a clenched fist of opinion with an open hand of inquiry. The mind of not knowing is spacious, flexible, and curious. It is the mind of a true scientist who is willing to discard a cherished theory in the face of new evidence. It is the beginner's mind of Zen, which is empty of preconceptions and therefore open to all possibilities. It is the simple, honest admission, "This is what I believe based on my limited experience, but I could be wrong." What is your experience? This posture does not make us weak, it makes us wise. It frees us from the exhausting burden of having to defend a fixed position and opens us up to a life of continuous learning and discovery. We can bring this profound wisdom into our lives through the practice of deep listening. This is a way of listening taught by many contemplative traditions, most notably by the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. The goal of deep listening is not to analyze, to debate, or to prepare a reply. The single goal is to offer the other person the space they need to empty their heart. We listen to understand. We set aside our own internal commentary, our own stories and judgments, and we offer the other person the rare and precious gift of our full, non-judgmental attention. We listen not just to their words, but for the feelings and the unmet needs that lie beneath their words. We can ask gentle, clarifying questions like, "Can you tell me more about that?" Or "How did that feel for you?" This practice can miraculously transform a situation of conflict into a moment of connection. You do not have to agree with someone's opinion to validate their humanity. By simply allowing someone to feel truly heard, you can dissolve the walls of separation that our competing views have built. Letting go of the need to be right is to choose peace over victory. It is to value connection more than correctness. It is to trade the small, stuffy prison of our own certainty for the vast, open, and living sky of wisdom. This attachment to our views, much like our attachment to the past, the future, and our own ego, is ultimately a strategy to create a sense of solidity and permanence in a world that offers none. All these forms of clinging are like attempts to build a sandcastle and command the tide not to come in. They are a denial of the most fundamental law of our existence. To proceed further on our path of letting go, to reach the very root of our clinging, we must now turn and face this fundamental reality directly. We must learn to make our peace with the universal, inescapable truth of impermanence. As we journey deeper into the landscape of the mind, unlatching the grips of the past, the future, the ego, and our most cherished opinions, we begin to sense a common foundation upon which all these attachments are built. They are all, in their own way, a form of protest. They are a protest against the fundamental, inescapable, and often uncomfortable nature of reality itself. All our clinging is an attempt to hold on to something, to fix it in place, to make it solid and permanent, in a world that is, by its very nature, as fluid and shifting as water. To reach the very root of our suffering, and therefore the root of our freedom, we must now turn and face this fundamental law directly. This is the teaching of anicca, the Pali word for impermanence. Anicca is not a belief system to be adopted. It is a universal law, as fundamental as gravity, waiting to be observed in every corner of our experience. The law of impermanence states that everything that comes into being is subject to decay and dissolution. Nothing is static, everything is in a constant state of flux. We can see this truth operating on every scale of existence. On the grandest cosmic scale, we see that stars are born. They burn for billions of years, and then they die, collapsing into black holes or exploding into nebulae that will seed the birth of new stars. Galaxies collide, mountains rise and are worn down to dust, and entire species emerge and vanish from the face of the earth. The universe is not a fixed stage. It is a single, dynamic, unfolding event. On a more human scale, we see our own bodies as undeniable proof of anicca. We are born. We grow from infancy to childhood, through adolescence to adulthood, and into old age. Our bodies are not solid objects, but processes. Millions of cells are dying and being replaced at this very moment. The body you have today is not the same physical entity you had a decade ago. It is a river of flowing matter, and we cannot stop its course. Nowhere is the truth of impermanence more vivid or more immediate than in the landscape of our own mind. Sit for just a moment and try to hold on to a single thought. You cannot. Another thought will inevitably arise to take its place. Observe your emotional world. A feeling of happiness dawns, triggered by a pleasant memory or a piece of good news. It feels wonderful, and we grasp at it, wanting it to stay forever, but it fades. A wave of irritation or sadness washes over us, and in our aversion, it feels as if it will last forever, but it too will pass. Our moods, our ideas, our desires are fiercer. Entire inner world is a ceaseless, flowing stream of phenomena, arising, shimmering for a moment, and disappearing. There is no solid ground to be found. The mind is not a thing, it is a process. It is a verb, not a noun. The Buddha's profound insight was that suffering, dukkha, is not caused by the fact of impermanence itself. Change is not the problem. The problem is our resistance to change. Our suffering is born from our clinging to things as if they were permanent. Life is a great, powerful, untamable river. Our clinging is the foolish and exhausting attempt to build a dam in the middle of this river. We try to stop the flow, to hold on to the part of the river we like, to possess a piece of its water. But the river of reality is infinitely more powerful than our small efforts to contain it. The river will always win. All of our stress, our anxiety, our grief, and our frustration is the feeling of the immense strain of holding this dam against the current. Letting go, then, is the ultimate act of wisdom. It is the decision to stop fighting the river. It is the dismantling of the dam and the willingness to learn how to swim, to build a raft, and to flow with the current of life as it is. There is a timeless story from the Middle East that captures the practical wisdom of this teaching. A powerful king, who was subject to great swings of mood, summoned his wisest advisor. He said, "I want you to create for me a magical ring. It must have the power to make me happy when I am in the depths of despair, and to make me humble and cautious when I am in the heights of triumph." The advisor, a man of deep contemplation, went away and returned sometime later with a simple gold ring. The king, eager to see the magic, took the ring and looked closely. There, engraved on its surface, was a short, simple phrase. The phrase was, "This too shall pass." The king contemplated these words. He imagined himself in a moment of glorious victory, his heart swelling with pride, and he read the words on the ring. A sense of humility would wash over him, a reminder that his glory was fleeting and not to be clung to. He then imagined himself in a moment of crushing defeat, his heart broken with despair. He would look at the ring, and its words would be a balm to his soul, a gentle promise that his suffering was not a permanent condition, that this too would pass. The ring was not magic. Its power was the power of truth. To see impermanence only as a source of loss is to miss half of its wisdom. A deep, heartfelt contemplation of anicca is not meant to be pessimistic. It is a powerful catalyst for appreciation and joy. It is the very fact that things are fleeting that makes them so precious. Would we watch a sunset with such rapt attention if it were to last for 1,000 years? Would we cherish the laughter of a child so deeply if we knew they would never grow up? It is the knowledge of the coming winter that makes the warmth of a summer afternoon so sweet. It is the awareness of our own mortality that can infuse every day, every moment, with a sacred, unrepeatable significance. The understanding of impermanence is the ultimate call to be fully present. We pay attention because we know that this moment, in exactly this form, will never come again. It is like the Japanese appreciation for cherry blossoms. The poignant beauty of the blossoms is inseparable from the knowledge that they will be gone in a week or two. Their transience is an essential part of their perfection. Furthermore, the law of impermanence is a profound source of hope. When we are trapped in the grip of a powerful negative state of deep grief, anxiety, or physical pain, the mind tends to catastrophize. It tells us, this will last forever. There is no way out. This belief in the permanence of our suffering is what makes it truly unbearable. Anicca is the gentle but firm voice of wisdom that whispers the truth. This too shall pass. No mood is final, no pain is eternal. The dark clouds of the mind will, by their very nature, eventually part. This knowledge does not magically erase the pain, but it gives us the resilience and the courage to endure it, knowing that it is a temporary weather condition, not a permanent climate. Impermanence is also what makes change and growth possible. If we were fixed, static entities, we would be trapped forever by our past mistakes and our current limitations. But because we are flowing processes, transformation is always possible. We can learn, we can grow, we can heal. This same truth applies to others, opening the door to forgiveness. The person who hurt us is also a process, not a fixed monolith of malice. Holding a grudge is like being angry at a river for a wave that has long since crashed upon the shore. The truth of impermanence, then, is not a grim philosophy of resignation. It is a dynamic and liberating insight. But to truly benefit from this teaching, it is not enough to simply understand it intellectually. To agree that everything changes is one thing. To directly perceive the arising and passing of phenomena in our own moment-to-moment experience is another thing entirely. This is the difference between reading a description of water and actually taking a drink. So, how do we train ourselves to see this constant flux, to witness the dance of creation and dissolution without being swept away by it? The answer lies in developing the capacity for bare, non-reactive awareness. We must learn to become the silent witness to our own lives. We must learn to observe. We have arrived at a profound understanding. We have seen that our attachments to the past and future are illusions, that our ego is a phantom, that our opinions are partial, and that the very fabric of reality is the ceaseless flowing dance of impermanence. Intellectually, we may accept this. Yet, our moment-to-moment experience is often one of struggle. We still get hooked. We still get swept away. A stray thought of worry arises, and in an instant, we become a worried person. A feeling of irritation appears, and we immediately become an irritated person. A pleasant sensation occurs, and we instantly begin scheming how to make it last. We are fused with the contents of our experience, reacting to the ever-changing flow as if each wave were a solid, permanent threat or prize. This deeply ingrained habit of the mind is called reactivity. It is the autopilot mode that governs most of our lives. To truly live the wisdom we have uncovered, we must learn to switch off this autopilot. We must learn the art of observing instead of reacting. For most of our lives, we live like puppets on a string. An external event happens, or an internal thought appears, and our strings are pulled. An email with a critical tone lands in our inbox, and the strings of anxiety and defensiveness are immediately yanked. Someone cuts us off in traffic, and the strings of rage pull our face into a grimace and our hand onto the horn. We see an advertisement for a luxury item, and the strings of desire and inadequacy begin to tug at our heart. In this state, we are not free. We are simply a bundle of conditioned reflexes, playing out a script we never consciously wrote. It is crucial to understand that this is not a personal moral failing. It is the default setting of the untrained human mind, a survival mechanism inherited from our ancestors that is poorly adapted for the complexities of modern life. To live in this state of reactivity is to be at the mercy of every passing thought, feeling, and circumstance. It is to be perpetually tossed about on the waves of our own experience. The path to freedom from this puppet-like existence lies in the discovery of a small but sacred space. It is the space that exists between stimulus and response, For the reactive mind, this space is almost non-existent. The stimulus of an insult and the response of anger seem to happen simultaneously, fused into a single event. But this space is always there, even if it is only a fraction of a second long. The entire practice of mindfulness, of meditation, is the practice of expanding this space. It is the practice of creating a pause. Within this pause, this sacred interval, lies our power. In this space, we have the freedom to choose our response. A reaction is automatic, conditioned, and unconscious. A response is intentional, considered, and wise. To move from reaction to response is to move from being a puppet to being a human being. It is the reclamation of our freedom and our dignity. How, then, do we cultivate this pause? We do it by training the mind to observe itself. This is the essence of insight meditation, or vipassana. We learn to watch the flow of our own consciousness without being swept away by it. We begin, as always, with an anchor, most commonly the breath. The breath holds us in the present moment. Then, from this anchored place, we begin to notice the traffic of the mind. To aid in this process, we can use the gentle technique of mental noting or labeling. When a thought about work arises, we can softly note in our mind, thinking. When we hear the sound of a bird, we can note, hearing. When a feeling of restlessness begins to stir in the body, we can note, restlessness. The purpose of this labeling is not to analyze or to create more thought. It is a precise technique for diffusion. The label creates a sliver of distance. It shifts our perspective from "I am restless" to the more objective and truthful observation, there is the experience of restlessness arising. The feeling is no longer a subject that has consumed us, but an object that we can observe in the field of our awareness. It transforms the experience from a personal crisis into an impersonal event. The great Thai meditation master Ajahn Chah used a beautiful analogy to describe this practice. He said the mind is like a busy road. The cars, trucks, buses, and motorcycles are our thoughts, feelings, memories, and sensations. The untrained mind, he explained, is like a person who stands in the middle of this busy road. They see a car, they like a happy thought, and they try to chase after it and jump on. They see a truck they don't like, a painful memory, and they try to stand in front of it and push it back. They get angry at the noisy motorcycles of irritating thoughts. They are constantly running, jumping, pushing, and fighting. Their life is one of chaos, exhaustion, and inevitable injury. The practice of meditation, Ajahn Chah taught, is simply learning to step out of the road. You find a comfortable, quiet place on the grassy verge, and you just sit. You watch the traffic go by. An old, beat-up car of regret drives past. You simply note, a car of regret, and you let it go on its way. A sleek, fast sports car of desire zips by. You note it, a car of desire, and you let it disappear down the road. A huge, loud, smoky truck of anger rumbles past, shaking the ground. You note it, you feel its vibrations, but you do not leap in front of it. You simply sit, watching it all come and go. You are not the traffic. You are the silent, peaceful watcher by the side of the road. Another classic metaphor points to this same truth. Our true nature, our basic awareness, is like the vast, open, and luminous sky. It is, by its nature, spacious, clear, and fundamentally peaceful. Our thoughts, emotions, and sensations are like the clouds that drift through this sky. Sometimes the sky is filled with dark, heavy storm clouds of sadness or fear. Sometimes it is dotted with light, fluffy white clouds of happiness and joy. Sometimes it is perfectly clear and blue, but throughout all of these changing weather patterns, the sky itself is never stained, harmed, or fundamentally altered by the clouds. The clouds arise within the sky, they linger for a while, and then they dissolve back into the sky. The fundamental error of our reactive mind is that we believe we are the clouds. We identify with the passing storm. The practice of observation is the process of disidentifying with the clouds and learning to rest in our vast, sky-like nature. We learn to let the weather of our minds simply be, knowing that we are the spacious awareness in which all weather happens. This practice of learning to observe instead of react is the very heart of living wisely. It is the practical, moment-to-moment application of the wisdom of impermanence. It is how we learn to surf the waves of life instead of being crushed by them. As we commit to this practice, as we patiently and kindly learn to sit by the side of the road of our mind, something beautiful and unexpected begins to happen. As we watch our own patterns of clinging, our own fear, our own greed, our own confusion arise and pass away, the cold, detached quality of a pure scientist begins to be warmed by a new feeling. A sense of tenderness towards this struggling mind begins to dawn. We see its frantic efforts, its confusion, its deep longing for peace, and our hearts begin to soften. This is the natural birth of compassion, and it is to this beautiful, essential fruit of our practice, the cultivation of a truly compassionate heart, that our journey now leads us. As we learn to sit by the side of the road, peacefully observing the traffic of our own mind, a profound transformation begins to take place. The sharp, clinical quality of a detached observer begins to soften, warmed by the light of a deeper understanding. As we watch our own mind grasp and push away, as we witness its frantic attempts to find security, as we see its confusion, its fear, and its deep, abiding hunger for happiness, our hearts cannot help but be moved. We begin to see our own mind, not as an enemy to be conquered, but as a lost and struggling child who simply wants to come home. This gentle, heartfelt recognition of suffering in ourselves and in others is the birth of compassion. In the Buddhist tradition, this is known as karuna. It is not pity, which looks down from above. It is not sentimentality, which can be weak and unsteady. Karuna is a resonance of the heart. It is the deep and unwavering wish for all beings, without exception, to be free from their suffering. The journey into compassion must always begin in the one place we so often neglect, with ourselves. For many of us, especially in a culture that prizes strength and criticizes vulnerability, the idea of self-compassion can feel foreign, self-indulgent, or even weak. We are home to a harsh inner critic, a relentless judge who keeps a detailed record of all our failures, flaws, and inadequacies. This is the voice that tells us we are not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy of love. We would never dream of speaking to a dear friend the way our inner critic speaks to us. The practice of self-compassion is the conscious intention to replace that inner critic with a voice of unconditional kindness and friendship. We resist this, believing that our self-criticism is what motivates us, that being hard on ourselves is what keeps us from becoming lazy and complacent. But the truth is the opposite. It is the warmth of compassion, not the whip of criticism, that gives us the strength and resilience to face our challenges, to learn from our mistakes, and to get back up after we fall. The practice of self-compassion is simple and can be cultivated in any moment of difficulty. When you make a mistake, when you feel inadequate, when you are in pain, you can pause. You can perhaps place a hand over your own heart, a gesture of warmth and tenderness, and you can offer yourself 3 recognitions. First, you acknowledge the truth of the moment. This is a moment of suffering. You name the pain, whether it is stress, sadness, or shame. Second, you connect your personal suffering to the universal human experience. Suffering is a part of life. All human beings feel this way at times. I am not alone. This recognition breaks the spell of isolation that so often accompanies our pain. And third, you offer yourself kindness. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion that I need. This is not about fixing the problem. It is about changing your relationship to the problem. It is about holding your own pain with the same tenderness you would offer to a beloved child who has fallen and scraped their knee. There is a powerful story from the life of the Buddha that illustrates how personal suffering can be transformed into universal compassion. A young woman named Kisa Gotami had an infant son who was the light of her life. One day, the child fell ill and died. Kisa Gotami was consumed by a grief so profound that she could not accept his death. Clutching his small, lifeless body, she went from house to house, from doctor to healer, frantically begging for a medicine that could bring her son back to life. People thought she had lost her mind. Finally, someone, taking pity on her, suggested she go and see the Buddha. She ran to him, laid her son at his feet, and pleaded for a cure. The Buddha looked at her not with judgment for her delusion, but with immense compassion for her pain. He said to her, "There is only one medicine that can help you. Go into the village and bring me back a single mustard seed from a house where no one has ever lost a child, a husband, a parent, or a friend." Filled with a desperate hope, Kisa Gotami went from door to door. At the first house, a kind woman said, "Of course, I will give you a mustard seed." But when Kisa Gotami asked her question, the woman's face fell. "Alas," she said, "the living in this house are few, but the dead are many. I lost my husband last year." Kisa Gotami went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. Every family had mustard seeds to spare, but every family had been touched by the hand of death. As the day wore on, her frantic personal grief began to transform. She realized that her suffering was not unique. The pain she felt in her heart was the same pain that existed behind every door in the village. Her personal tragedy was a part of the vast, shared ocean of human sorrow. This profound insight allowed her to finally release her clinging to her son's body, to accept the universal truth of impermanence, and to find peace not by escaping her grief, but by embracing it as a part of her connection to all of humanity. This is the path of compassion. It begins with our own intimate suffering, and through the recognition of our shared humanity, it expands to embrace the suffering of all. When we have learned to hold our own imperfections with kindness, we lose the need to demand perfection from others. When we are familiar with our own inner struggles with greed, anger, and confusion, we can no longer see those who act out of these states as evil monsters. We see them, instead, as people who are trapped, just as we are, in the webs of suffering. We begin to look beneath the surface of their difficult behavior. We see that their lashing anger is often a mask for a deep-seated fear. We see that their arrogance is a shield for a fragile insecurity. This does not mean we condone or accept harmful behavior, but it prevents us from reacting with blind hatred. It allows us to protect ourselves with firm boundaries, while still holding the other person in a space of understanding. Compassion is not only a gift to others, it is a powerful protection for our own hearts, preventing the poison of resentment from finding a home within us. Cultivating compassion, therefore, is an act of letting go of judgment. The judging mind is the separating mind. It is constantly sorting the world into rigid categories of good and bad, worthy and unworthy, right and wrong. It thrives on comparison and creates a sense of superiority or inferiority. The compassionate mind, on the other hand, is the connecting mind. It is always looking for what we have in common. And what we all have in common is this: we all suffer, and we all wish to be happy. This is the common ground of our existence. To let go of judgment is a radical practice. It is the conscious choice to suspend our inner commentary and simply allow people, including ourselves, to be as they are. It is the recognition that we never truly know the full story of another person's life, the battles they are fighting, or the burdens they are carrying. Compassion is not a passive state. It is the heart of engaged wisdom. The feeling of compassion, karuna, naturally gives rise to compassionate action. A kind word, a helping hand, a patient earth, these are the ways compassion manifests in the world. It is the force that motivates us to alleviate suffering wherever we encounter it. It is the understanding that our own liberation is inextricably bound up with the liberation of all beings. It is the warmth that makes the wisdom of letting go truly transformative. It allows us to hold the brokenness of the world and our own imperfections with a gentle and courageous heart. As we cultivate this spacious, non-judgmental, and compassionate mind, we begin to relax our anxious need to control, to fix, and to manage every aspect of our lives. We stop seeing the world as a series of problems to be solved or threats to be neutralized. This brings us face to face with one of the ego's most fundamental and deep-seated strategies for navigating an uncertain world: the powerful, pervasive, and ultimately stressful illusion of control. As the compassionate heart opens, we begin to hold our own imperfections and the imperfections of the world with a new tenderness. This softening creates a natural sense of relaxation, a willingness to allow things to be as they are. And in this relaxation, we come face to face with one of the mind's most deep-seated and stressful habits: the relentless need for control. This need is the engine of our anxiety. It is the inner micromanager that stays up all night, running through scenarios, trying to anticipate every threat and manage every outcome. It is the voice that whispers, "If I just think about this enough, worry about it enough, and plan for it enough, I can prevent disaster. I can force life to submit to my will." This desperate attempt to impose order on a fundamentally unpredictable world is a direct, fear-based reaction to the truth of impermanence. Because we are terrified of the ever-flowing river of life, we exhaust ourselves trying to build a fortress on its banks. The first step in letting go of control is to see, with radical honesty, how little we actually control. We expend enormous amounts of energy trying to manage the thoughts, feelings, and actions of other people, our partners, our children, our colleagues. We get frustrated and angry when they do not behave according to our script, failing to see that every other person is a universe unto themselves, with their own complex inner world that is utterly beyond our command. We try to control external events, worrying about the economy, the weather, or political outcomes, as if the force of our anxiety could somehow steer the ship of the world. Yet, a moment of sober reflection shows us that these vast, impersonal forces are completely indifferent to our personal preferences. The illusion of control becomes even more transparent when we turn our gaze inward. We believe we are the masters of our own inner house, but are we? Can you decide what your very next thought will be? You cannot. Thoughts simply appear, unbidden, from the mysterious depths of the mind. Can you, by sheer force of will, command yourself to feel happy when you are sad, or to feel calm when you are anxious? You cannot. Our emotional states, like the weather, have their own patterns and seasons. We can influence them, we can learn to navigate them, but we cannot command them into existence. We are not the god of our inner world, controlling the climate. At best, we are the humble meteorologist, learning to read the signs and report on the conditions with clarity and wisdom. The attempt to control what is inherently uncontrollable is the very definition of a futile struggle. It is the primary source of our chronic stress, our muscular tension, our racing thoughts, and our inability to simply be at peace. It is here that we must reclaim the word surrender. In a culture that worships effort and equates surrender with defeat, this is a challenging but vital task. Surrender, in a spiritual context, is not weakness, passivity, or giving up. It is an act of profound intelligence and strength. It is the wisdom to distinguish between what is in our power and what is not, and to stop wasting our life force fighting battles we can never win. It is the radical acceptance of the reality of the present moment. Surrender does not mean you stop taking action. It means you stop being attached to the outcome of that action. You pour all your energy into what you can control: your intention, your effort, your integrity, and you consciously release the rest. This act of surrender is what liberates all the energy that was once tied up in worry and resistance, and makes it available for wise and effective action in the here and now. It is the ultimate empowerment. There is a classic Taoist parable that illustrates this principle beautifully. In a field stood a great and mighty oak tree. It was a symbol of strength, its trunk thick and solid, its branches unyielding. It had weathered 100 years of storms by standing firm and resisting the wind. Beside it grew a slender stalk of bamboo. It seemed fragile and weak in comparison, bending with every slight breeze. One year, a great typhoon, a storm of unprecedented violence, swept through the land. The mighty oak tree, true to its nature, stood firm. It braced itself against the howling gales, its great trunk groaning under the strain. It fought the wind with all its strength. The bamboo, on the other hand, offered no resistance at all. It simply bent with the wind, bowing so low that its top touched the very ground. It surrendered completely to the overwhelming force of the storm. The wind raged through the night, and when the morning came, the great oak tree, which had resisted so fiercely, lay broken and uprooted. The slender bamboo, which had surrendered, simply swayed gently in the breeze, unharmed. The story teaches us that our conventional idea of strength as rigidity is a dangerous illusion. True strength, the strength that endures, lies in flexibility, adaptability, and the courage to yield to forces greater than ourselves. It is the wisdom to bend with the winds of change, rather than being broken by our resistance to them. We can bring this wisdom into our lives with a simple but powerful practice. When you find yourself in a situation that is causing you stress and anxiety, take a moment to draw 2 circles in your mind. The first is a large outer circle. This is your sphere of concern. Inside this circle, place all the elements of the situation that you have absolutely no control over. Another person's mood, their decisions, the final outcome of a project, past events, the traffic on the highway. Now, draw a much smaller circle inside the larger one. This is your sphere of influence. Inside this small circle, place the very few things you have direct control over: your own breath, your posture, the words you choose to speak next, your own attitude. The practice is to consciously, deliberately, let go of trying to manage everything in the large outer circle. You release it, you surrender it, and you bring all of your focus, all of your creative energy to the small inner circle. You focus only on what you can actually do, right here, right now. This simple shift in perspective can instantly reduce anxiety and restore a profound sense of agency, even in the most difficult circumstances. You are no longer a victim of what you cannot control. You are the master of what you can. This practice allows us to change our entire orientation to life. Instead of seeing life as an adversary to be conquered or a problem to be solved, we can begin to see it as a dance partner. A truly skilled dancer does not try to rigidly control every movement of their partner. They are not focused on a fixed sequence of steps. Instead, they are in a state of responsive flow. They lead for a moment, then they follow. They are sensitive to the rhythm, the momentum, and the movements of their partner, responding with grace and skill. To dance with uncertainty is to trust the music of life, to let go of the need to lead all the time, and to enjoy the spontaneous, unscripted beauty of the dance as it unfolds. Letting go of our need to control the world around us is a monumental step toward inner peace. It allows the clenched fist of the mind to finally relax, but the controlling habit is sly and persistent. As we begin to walk the spiritual path, the ego often tries to co-opt the journey itself. Having decided to let go, it now wants to be the perfect letter-goer. It turns peace into a goal to be achieved, enlightenment into a project to be managed, and the present moment into something to be captured and controlled. To find a truly effortless and authentic peace, we must learn to release our grip on even this most subtle of attachments. We must let go of our expectations for the path itself. Having learned to relax our grip on the outer world, to release our frantic need to control people, events, and outcomes, we are invited to a deeper and more subtle form of surrender. The controlling mind, clever and persistent, does not simply vanish. It often changes its strategy. Seeing that its old attachments are being abandoned, it can seize upon the spiritual path itself, and turn it into a new and ambitious project. The ego, which once sought to accumulate wealth or status, now seeks to accumulate enlightenment. It puts on spiritual robes, learns a new vocabulary of peace and presence, and begins to subtly measure its progress against some imagined ideal. This is the final and most insidious trap, the trap of spiritual expectation. To find true, effortless freedom, we must even learn to let go of the desire to be free. This phenomenon is sometimes called spiritual materialism. It is the ego's attempt to turn the tools of liberation into new possessions for its collection. It is the mind that keeps a detailed log of meditation hours, that compares its insights to those described in books, that feels pride in its spiritual understanding, and judges others for their lack of it. It is the spiritual shopper mentality, which restlessly seeks the perfect technique, the most powerful teacher, or the ultimate retreat that will finally deliver peace, as if peace were a commodity to be acquired. This entire orientation, however, is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. It is still rooted in a sense of lack, in the belief that I am not peaceful now, but I will be in the future if I just try hard enough. This very striving, this tense, goal-oriented effort to become peaceful, is the very essence of non-peace. The harder we grasp for the butterfly of serenity, the more violently it flutters away. We find ourselves in a frustrating paradox. Our desperate effort to relax is itself a form of tension. The path out of this paradox is a delicate dance between wise effort and non-striving. Letting go of spiritual expectations does not mean becoming passive or lazy. The path requires discipline. We must still make the effort to show up for our lives, to sit on the meditation cushion even when we don't feel like it, to practice mindfulness when we remember. But the crucial difference lies in the quality of that effort. Is it a tense, anxious, grasping effort, fueled by the belief that we are flawed and need to be fixed? Or is it a patient, gentle, and consistent effort, fueled by curiosity and a deep kindness toward ourselves? Think of an archer. To shoot an arrow, she must use great effort to draw back the heavy bowstring. This requires strength, stability, and focus. But the final, critical moment, the moment the arrow is loosed, must be one of complete release. If she is tense at the moment of release, if she clings to the arrow for even a millisecond, her aim will be thrown off. The spiritual life is much the same. We apply wise, diligent effort to our practice, we draw the bow. But the insight, the peace, the liberation does not come from the effort itself. It arrives in the moment of surrender, in the letting go, in the release of the arrow into the vast, open sky. There is a classic Zen story that speaks directly to this truth. A young, earnest student, full of ambition to attain enlightenment, approached his master. "Master," he asked, "what must I do before I am enlightened?" The master, who was chopping firewood, paused for a moment and replied simply, "Chop wood, carry water." The student, though perhaps a little disappointed by this mundane answer, dedicated himself to his practice and his daily chores. Some years later, he returned to the master, feeling he had made great progress. He asked, "Master, what is it like after one is enlightened?" The master, who was now carrying buckets of water from the well, looked at the student and replied, "Without missing a step, chop wood, carry water." The profound wisdom of this story is that enlightenment is not a future, supernatural state that allows us to escape the ordinary reality of our lives. It is a radical transformation of our relationship to our ordinary lives. Before enlightenment, we chop wood and carry water with a mind full of restlessness, discontent, and striving. We chop wood while dreaming of the day we will become a Buddha. We carry water while lamenting that we are not yet at peace. After enlightenment, we perform the exact same tasks, but we do so with a mind that is fully present, spacious, and free. We chop wood, and there is only the chopping of wood. We carry water, and there is only the carrying of water. The destination is not at the end of a long and arduous road. The destination is discovered in the quality of attention we bring to each and every step of the road. The path itself becomes the destination. This understanding invites us to let go of our spiritual timelines. We release the persistent belief that I will be happy when I have meditated for 1,000 hours, when I have mastered this technique, when I have had a life-changing insight. This when is just another form of living in the future, another way of denying the possibility of peace in the present moment. We learn to practice for the sake of practicing. We sit in meditation not to achieve a future state of bliss, but simply to be with ourselves, honestly and kindly, for 20 minutes. We practice mindfulness while we walk, not to get anywhere, but to enjoy the simple, miraculous sensation of our feet touching the earth. The practice becomes its own reward. And in this shift of intention, we discover a profound secret. Peace is not something you build, acquire, or achieve through effort. Peace is our natural state. It is the silence that is already here, underneath the noise of our striving minds. The practice, then, is not about creating peace. It is about patiently and gently letting go of all the stress, the ambition, the self-judgment, and the clinging that obscures the peace that has been here all along. It is not a journey to a distant, foreign land. It is simply a return home. This means we must also learn to embrace the winding, unpredictable nature of the path. The journey of awakening is not a linear, upward climb. It is a spiral. There will be moments of stunning clarity and profound peace, followed by periods of doubt, confusion, and the reemergence of old, painful patterns. If we are attached to the expectation of constant progress, these periods of seeming regression will feel like personal failures, causing immense frustration and despair. But if we can let go of our expectations, we can see these moments not as steps backward, but simply as part of the path. We learn to be patient with the process, to be kind to ourselves wherever we may find ourselves on the spiral. Letting go of our spiritual expectations is the final turn of the key in the lock of the ego's control. It is the ultimate act of trust, allowing us to walk our path not with the tense grip of an ambitious achiever, but with the relaxed, open hand of a humble pilgrim. But this walk, this journey, is not always on smooth and easy ground. The path of life is inevitably strewn with obstacles. There will be moments where we stumble, where we fall, where we fail to live up to our deepest aspirations. Our worldly projects will sometimes crumble, and our best intentions will sometimes lead to ruin. To continue our walk with courage and resilience, we must now learn how to relate to these unavoidable moments of failure, not as catastrophes that define us, but as profound opportunities for surrender and growth. As we learn to walk our path with an open hand, letting go of our spiritual expectations, we inevitably find that the path is not always smooth. We stumble, we fall. A cherished project at work collapses. A business we poured our heart into fails. A relationship ends in a way we perceive as a personal defeat. In these moments, we come face to face with one of the most feared and misunderstood experiences in modern life: the experience of failure. Our culture teaches us to see failure as an endpoint, a verdict, a shameful brand upon our character. We are taught to hide our failures, to deny them, to spin them into successes, and to live in mortal fear of being exposed as the imposter we secretly believe ourselves to be. But in the landscape of wisdom, failure is not an enemy. It is a powerful, if sometimes painful, teacher. It is an unavoidable and essential part of a life lived with courage. To find true resilience, we must learn to surrender to our failures and to find the hidden lessons within them. The societal narrative around failure is a primary source of our collective anxiety. We are relentlessly presented with images of seamless success. Social media feeds become highlight reels of victories, perfect vacations, and flawless achievements. We worship the winners, the billionaires, the celebrities, and we rarely hear the true stories of the countless missteps, bankruptcies, and crushing defeats that paved their way. This creates an impossible standard, a culture of perfectionism, where any deviation from a successful outcome is seen as a sign of personal weakness or inadequacy. This fear of failure keeps us playing small. It prevents us from taking creative risks, from starting a new venture, from speaking our truth, from loving with an open heart. We become so afraid of the potential pain of falling that we choose never to climb at all, living in a safe but constricted version of our own lives. The Buddhist perspective offers a radical and liberating reframing of failure. From this viewpoint, failure is not a judgment on our worth. It is simply feedback. It is life holding up a mirror, showing us with unflinching clarity where our attachments and illusions lie. When a business venture fails, what is it that truly hurts? It is not just the loss of money. It is the pain of our shattered expectations. It is the humiliation of our bruised ego. It is the confrontation with our attachment to a specific, desired outcome. Failure is a spotlight, and it illuminates our clinging like nothing else can. It is also a direct, experiential teaching in the law of impermanence. We had a plan, we had a vision, we were certain of how things would unfold, but the unpredictable river of life flowed in a different direction. Failure shatters our cherished illusion of control and forces us to acknowledge our place within a vast, complex system that is far beyond our command. Perhaps the most crucial insight is the distinction between an event and an identity. An event happened. The project was not successful. This is a simple, objective fact. The ego, however, is not content with this. It immediately creates a story, a narrative of identity. I am a failure. This story, I am a failure, is not a fact. It is a painful and toxic piece of fiction that we repeat to ourselves until we believe it is true. The practice of surrendering to failure is the practice of learning to separate the event from the story. It is the ability to stay with the clean, simple pain of the event, the disappointment, the sadness, without adding the second, unnecessary layer of self-recrimination and shame. There is a beautiful Japanese art form called kintsugi, which literally means to join with gold. When a precious ceramic bowl or cup is broken, the artisans of kintsugi do not try to hide the damage. They do not glue the pieces back together seamlessly to pretend the break never happened. Instead, they use a special lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum to mend the cracks. The result is breathtaking. The shattered object is not just restored, it is transformed. The intricate lines of gold do not hide the breaks, they highlight them. They become a beautiful map of the object's history, a testament to its damage and its recovery. A kintsugi bowl is often considered more beautiful, more valuable, and more interesting than it was before it was broken. The cracks are now its greatest feature. This art form is a profound metaphor for a wise approach to our own lives. We are all like that ceramic bowl. Life will inevitably drop us. Our hearts will be broken. Our plans will shatter. Our culture teaches us to feel shame, to hide our cracks, to present a facade of unbroken perfection. The spirit of kintsugi teaches us the opposite. It teaches us to embrace our imperfections, to honor our scars. It shows us that our failures, our wounds, and our heartbreaks are not things to be hidden. They are opportunities to mend ourselves with the gold of wisdom, self-compassion, and resilience. We can learn to see the moments of our deepest breaking as the moments of our greatest potential for beauty and strength. We can become stronger, wiser, and more compassionate, not in spite of our failures, but because of them. We become more beautiful, not for our perfection, but for the golden threads of healing that trace the map of our lives. When the painful experience of failure occurs, we can learn to move through it with this kind of wisdom. The first step is not to deny the pain, but to surrender to it. Acknowledge that it hurts. Allow the feelings of disappointment, sadness, or embarrassment to be there. Hold these difficult emotions with the same mindful, compassionate attention we have been cultivating. This is the act of kindness that begins the healing process. The second step is to watch for the story. Notice the inner critic as it swoops in with its narrative of "I am worthless" or "this always happens to me." Recognize these as just thoughts, not as the truth. Gently unhook yourself from the story and come back to the raw sensations of the present moment. Once the initial emotional storm has passed, you can move to the third step, harvesting the lesson. With a sense of gentle curiosity, you can ask, "What is this experience here to teach me? What attachment has been revealed? What illusion has been shattered?" This is not about blaming yourself, but about extracting the precious, golden wisdom from the raw material of your pain. And the final step is simply to begin again, from exactly where you are, carrying not the weight of the failure, but the wisdom it has bestowed. Ultimately, failure is one of life's greatest and most persistent teachers of humility. It systematically dismantles the ego's arrogance. It chips away at our pride and our mistaken belief that we are in control of our destiny. It reminds us, again and again, that we are fallible, vulnerable, and deeply interconnected beings, participating in a vast process that is mysterious and unpredictable. This humility is not a state of humiliation. It is a spacious, peaceful, and honest state of mind, free from the heavy burden of needing to be perfect, of needing to always win. It is the fertile ground from which true wisdom grows. As we learn to surrender to failure, to see it not as an enemy, but as a wise teacher, we develop a new kind of courage. We become more willing to take risks, to be vulnerable, to live a fuller and more authentic life, but to find a state of true equanimity, a peace that is not dependent on the pendulum swings of fortune. Our practice of letting go must be applied with equal skill to both sides of the coin. If we learn to not be shattered by our failures, we must also learn to not be swept away by our successes. We must now turn our attention to the other side of the ledger, to the sweet but dangerous nectar of praise, victory, and achievement, and learn to let go of our attachment to them as well. Having explored the wisdom of surrendering to failure, transforming it from a source of shame into a catalyst for growth, we must now turn our attention to its seductive twin. In a world that fears failure, success is worshipped as the ultimate prize, the safe harbor where all our anxieties will finally come to rest. We chase it with relentless ambition, believing that once we achieve it, once we receive the praise, the recognition, and the rewards, we will have found lasting happiness and security. But the path of letting go reveals a paradoxical truth. The golden chains of success can be just as binding, and in some ways more spiritually dangerous, than the iron chains of failure. To find a peace that is truly unconditional, we must learn to hold our victories with the same light and open hand with which we learn to hold our defeats. The danger of success lies in its power to intoxicate the ego. While failure delivers a direct and obvious form of suffering, success offers a sweet poison that we drink willingly. When praise comes our way, when we achieve a long-sought-after goal, the ego swells with pride. It eagerly consumes the validation, reinforcing its story of being special, important, and superior. This ego inflation creates a subtle but powerful sense of separation from others, building a wall of arrogance that isolates us from genuine human connection. But the trap does not end there. The very moment a success is achieved, a new and persistent anxiety is born, the fear of losing it. The writer who publishes a successful novel is immediately confronted with the pressure of writing another one that is just as good. The executive who gets a promotion now lives with the stress of maintaining that new status. The peace that success was supposed to deliver is replaced by a new, more refined form of worry. This is a perfect illustration of viparinama dukkha, the suffering inherent in change. Even a pleasant experience becomes a source of pain because we cling to it, fearing its inevitable end. We become addicted to the validation, our sense of well-being now dangerously dependent on the next compliment, the next like, the next positive review, a puppet to the ever-shifting opinions of the world. The Buddhist tradition frames this human predicament within the teaching of the 8 worldly winds. These are the 8 conditions, arranged in 4 pairs of opposites, that constantly blow through our lives, threatening to throw us off balance. The first pair is praise and blame. The second is success, or gain, and failure, or loss. The third is pleasure and pain. And the fourth is fame and disrepute. The mind of the ordinary person is like a weather vane, spinning frantically with every shift in these winds. When the warm, sweet winds of praise, success, pleasure, and fame blow our way, we are ecstatic, lifted into the heights of elation. But when the winds inevitably change direction, and the cold, harsh gales of blame, failure, pain, and obscurity arrive, we are plunged into the depths of despair. The spiritual path is not about learning to control these winds. They are an inescapable part of the climate of human existence. The practice is to cultivate an inner stability so profound that we are no longer helplessly blown about by them. It is the practice of becoming a mountain, not a weather vane. Imagine a great, solid mountain, its roots plunging deep into the heart of the earth. Its peak rises into the sky, serene and majestic. The winds begin to blow. From the east comes a warm, fragrant wind, carrying the sweet sounds of praise and admiration. It whispers of our greatness and our accomplishments. The mountain is unmoved. From the west comes a bitter, icy wind, carrying the sharp stones of blame and criticism. It howls with accusations and judgments. The mountain remains perfectly still. From the north blows the boisterous wind of gain, showering the mountain with the treasures of success and fame. From the south blows the desolate wind of loss, stripping away all that was once held dear. Through it all, the mountain simply is. It does not swell with pride in the warm wind, nor does it shrink in fear from the cold one. Its immense stability comes not from resisting the winds, but from being so deeply grounded in its own being that the passing weather is of no consequence. The Buddha taught that the mind of a liberated person is like this unshakable mountain. It has found a source of peace and equanimity that is not dependent on the changing fortunes of the world. This is the stable, lasting peace that we seek. The antidote to the intoxication of success and the key to becoming the mountain is the cultivation of humility and gratitude. When a moment of success arrives, instead of allowing the ego to immediately claim it as a personal victory, we can practice seeing its profoundly interdependent nature. No success is ever a solo performance. We can reflect on the countless causes and conditions that had to align for this moment to occur. We can think of the parents and teachers who supported us, the colleagues who collaborated with us, the unseen workers who created the infrastructure we rely on, the writers and artists from past generations who provided the inspiration. When we see that any success is the fruit of a vast, interconnected web of life, the ego's claim of sole ownership dissolves. Pride is replaced by a natural and humble sense of wonder. In the space created by this humility, gratitude can blossom. Instead of feeling proud, we can feel thankful. We can feel a sense of gratitude for our good fortune, for the support of others, for the simple fact that we had the health and opportunity to pursue our goal. Pride is a cold, isolating emotion that creates separation. Gratitude is a warm, expansive emotion that fosters connection. It connects us to our world and to each other. This does not mean we cannot enjoy our achievements. The key is to enjoy them lightly, to hold them as one might hold a beautiful, fragrant flower. We can appreciate its beauty fully. We can inhale its scent deeply, but we do not crush it in our fist, trying to possess its beauty forever. We enjoy it, knowing that it too is impermanent, and that our fundamental worth has nothing to do with holding this flower. This practice gradually shifts our search for well-being from the external world to the internal one. We begin to discover a source of contentment that is not conditional. It is the peace that comes from a quiet mind. It is the joy that arises from a compassionate heart. It is the simple, profound satisfaction of being fully present in our own lives. This is the unconditioned good, the only treasure that cannot be given to us by praise and cannot be taken from us by blame. To cultivate this inner wealth is the only path to a security that is real and an equanimity that is unshakable. By learning to let go of our attachment to both failure and success, we begin to walk the true middle path. We learn to meet both triumph and disaster, as the poet said, and treat those two impostors just the same. We are no longer a frantic gambler, living in ecstasy or agony depending on the turn of a card. We become the calm, observant dealer who simply watches the cards being played with a steady hand and a peaceful heart. This ability to hold life's great opposites without being thrown into turmoil requires a new and different kind of strength. It is not the strength of rigidity, of armor, or of a defended fortress. It is a strength that our culture often misunderstands, a power that is frequently mistaken for weakness. It is the paradoxical, resilient, and deeply courageous strength that is found only in a heart that is willing to be completely, utterly vulnerable. As we learn to walk the middle path, holding both success and failure with a light and steady hand, we begin to cultivate a profound sense of equanimity. This inner stability, this unshakable peace, does not come from building thicker walls or stronger armor. It does not arise from becoming invincible or impervious to the world. On the contrary, it arises from a place that our culture has taught us to fear, a quality we have been conditioned to see as weakness. It is born from the courageous, paradoxical, and transformative power of vulnerability. We have been taught that strength is a hardened shield. The wisdom of letting go reveals that true, resilient strength is found only in a soft and open heart. From a very young age, we learn to protect ourselves. We learn that to expose our true feelings, our fears, our insecurities, is to risk being judged, shamed, or rejected. And so, we begin to construct our armor. For some, this armor is made of cynicism and sarcasm, a way of keeping the world at a safe distance with biting wit. For others, it is forged from the steel of perfectionism, the belief that if we are flawless, no one can ever hurt us. For still others, the armor is one of cool, intellectual detachment or emotional numbness, a way of living in our heads so we don't have to feel the messy, unpredictable sensations in our hearts. We learn to say "I'm fine" when we are breaking inside. We build these defensive walls around our tender core, believing they will keep us safe. And in a limited way, they do. The armor protects us from some of the scrapes and bruises of life. But we fail to realize the immense price we pay for this safety. The same walls that we build to keep out pain also keep out joy. The same fortress that protects us from judgment also isolates us from love. We cannot selectively numb emotion. When we numb our fear and our grief, we also numb our capacity for happiness and connection. Living behind the armor is an exhausting performance. It requires a constant, vigilant expenditure of energy to maintain the facade, to manage the impressions of others, to make sure no one sees the cracks in our carefully constructed image. We are safe, perhaps, but we are also prisoners in a fortress of our own making, unable to truly touch the world and unable to be truly touched by it. The act of surrender in this context is the courageous decision to begin to take off the armor. It is the willingness to be vulnerable, to be seen in our authentic, imperfect humanity. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is the very measure of our courage. It is the willingness to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. It is the birthplace of all the emotions and experiences we crave most: love, belonging, joy, trust, and intimacy. We believe we connect with others through our strengths, but in reality, connection is forged in the crucible of shared vulnerability. When you have the courage to share your true feelings, to admit you don't have all the answers, to speak about your fears, you give the other person the implicit permission to do the same. The mask comes off, the performance ends, and a genuine human connection becomes possible. We connect not over our polished perfections, but over our shared and beautiful imperfections. There is a simple and powerful metaphor for this process found in the life of a single seed. A seed, in its dormant state, is encased in a hard, protective shell. This shell is its armor. It keeps the precious life force within it safe from the outside world. As long as the seed remains in this state, it is secure, it is invulnerable, but it is also not truly alive. It is a thing of pure potential, unfulfilled. For the seed to become what it is meant to be, flower, a plant, a mighty tree, something dramatic must happen. Its hard, protective shell must break. It must surrender its safety. It must become vulnerable, exposing its soft, tender inner core to the raw, unpredictable elements of the soil, the water, and the sun. This moment of breaking is not the death of the seed. It is the beginning of its real life. The life force is released only through this act of profound vulnerability. We are just like that seed. Our ego, with all its defenses and its armor, is our protective shell. We can choose to live our entire lives inside it, safe and dormant, a life of unfulfilled potential. Or we can find the courage to let that shell crack open. We can allow our hearts to be vulnerable, to risk being seen, to feel the world without a filter. This is not a path free from pain. To be vulnerable is to accept the possibility of being hurt, but it is the only path to being truly, vibrantly alive. The choice is between the safety of the tomb and the perilous, unpredictable, and magnificent journey of growth. This is not a call for reckless self-exposure or for casting aside all our boundaries. The practice of vulnerability is a wise and intentional one. It begins with taking small risks with people who have earned the right to hear our story, people who have shown themselves to be worthy of our trust. It is the practice of choosing honesty over pretense in small moments. It is finding the courage to say, "I need help," instead of pretending we can do it all ourselves. It is admitting, "I don't know," instead of faking expertise. It is saying the simple, terrifying words that hurt my feelings, instead of silently building a wall of resentment. Each of these small acts of authenticity is an act of letting go. It is the letting go of the heavy burden of the mask, the letting go of the exhausting performance of perfection. This brings us back to the paradox of strength. The brittle strength of the oak tree, of the armor, of the wall, looks impressive. It is rigid, hard, and unyielding. But under real pressure, it does not bend, it shatters. The resilient strength of the bamboo, of water, of the open heart may look weak in comparison. It is soft, flexible, and yielding. But under pressure, it does not break. It flows, it adapts, it endures. It takes far more courage to remain soft and open in a difficult world than it does to become hard and defended. This vulnerable, open-hearted strength is the source of true resilience. As we find the courage to let our own protective shells begin to crack, as we let go of the need to be perfect and impenetrable, a new kind of inner space is created. It is the space that was once occupied by our armor, by our fear, by our relentless self-monitoring. This space can feel unfamiliar, even empty at first. But this is not an emptiness to be feared. It is a spaciousness to be explored. It is a fertile ground in which something new can grow. What is this space? What is the nature of this creative emptiness that appears when the ego's structures begin to dissolve? To answer this question, our journey must now take us into the very heart of Buddhist philosophy, to explore the profound and often misunderstood wisdom of what is called emptiness, or shunyata. As we find the courage to let our defensive armor crack open, to embrace the profound strength of vulnerability, a new inner landscape is revealed. At first, this landscape can feel unnerving. The space once occupied by our rigid opinions, our carefully constructed identity, and our constant inner chatter can feel strangely empty. Our culture teaches us to fear emptiness. We rush to fill every silent moment with noise, every open space in our schedule with activity, every quiet corner of our minds with distraction. But in the wisdom traditions of the East, this emptiness is not a void to be feared, but the very source of all creativity, freedom, and potential. To understand this is to hold the master key that unlocks the deepest dimension of letting go. This is the wisdom of shunyata. The Sanskrit word shunyata is most often translated as emptiness, but this translation is the source of profound misunderstanding. For the Western ear, emptiness sounds like nothingness, a cold, nihilistic void. But shunyata does not mean that things do not exist. The chair you are sitting on is real. The sound you are hearing is real. The feeling in your heart is real. Shunyata points to a more subtle and liberating truth. It means that things are empty of a separate, independent, inherent existence. Nothing exists on its own, from its own side, isolated from everything else. Think of a wave rising from the sea. The wave has a clear shape, a form, a beginning, and an end. But is the wave separate from the ocean? Number. It is the ocean expressing itself in the form of a wave for a short time. The wave is empty of a separate wave self, but it is completely full of ocean. In the same way, we are empty of a separate, isolated self, but we are completely full of the entire universe. This emptiness is not a metaphysical theory. It is a truth we can see when we look closely at anything. Consider the very concept of a tree. We use a single word, tree, as if it were a solid, independent thing. But if we go looking for the essential treeness, where is it? We find bark, leaves, sap, roots. These are made of cells, which are made of molecules, which are made of atoms, which are themselves mostly empty space and vibrating energy. The tree cannot exist without the soil, the sun, the rain, the sky. It is not a separate entity. It is a temporary, flowing process, a focal point where the entire cosmos converges. Its existence is completely dependent on everything that is supposedly not the tree. This is the meaning of emptiness. It is not an absence of life. It is the very nature of life's intimate, radical interconnectedness. Emptiness and interdependence, therefore, are two sides of the same coin. The reason things are empty of a separate self is precisely because they are completely dependent on everything else. The Buddhist term for this is praticca samutpada, or dependent origination. The Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh gave us a beautiful way to understand this with his concept of interbeing. He would hold up a single sheet of paper and invite his students to see the cloud in it. Without the cloud, there is no rain. Without the rain, the tree cannot grow. Without the tree, the paper cannot be made. He invited them to see the sunshine, the logger who cut the tree, the baker who made the logger's breakfast. He showed them that if you were to take the cloud, the sun, the logger, and the wheat field out of the sheet of paper, the paper could no longer exist. The entire universe is present in and supportive of that single sheet of paper. This same truth applies to ourselves. The entity we call me cannot exist for a single second without the not-me elements that sustain it. We cannot exist without the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink. We cannot exist without the parents who gave us life, the language we were taught, the culture that shaped our thoughts. The idea of a separate, independent I that is the sole author of its own life is a profound illusion. Seeing this clearly, feeling this deep interbeing in our bones, is what dissolves the hard, isolating shell of the ego. It is the ultimate letting go. The ancient Taoist sage Lao Tzu spoke of the creative power of this emptiness in his great work, the Tao Te Ching. He wrote, "We shape clay into a pot, but it is the empty space within that makes it useful. We hammer wood for a house, but it is the inner space that makes it livable. We work with being, but non-being is what we use." This is a perfect metaphor for the mind. We are often obsessed with the clay of our mind-sour knowledge, our memories, our beliefs, our personality. We spend our lives trying to accumulate more and more mental content, filling ourselves up with facts and opinions, thinking that this is what makes us valuable. But the wisdom traditions teach that our true utility, our creativity, our wisdom, and our peace arise not from the content, but from the space. It is the silence between thoughts where insight can dawn. It is the spaciousness of a non-judgmental awareness that allows us to see a situation clearly. It is the emptiness of the heart, free from the clutter of resentment and fear, that allows compassion to arise. From this perspective, the entire journey of letting go that we have been exploring is an act of creating this sacred, useful space. When we let go of the past, we clear out the dusty old furniture of memory that clutters our inner room. When we let go of the future, we cease filling the room with the anxious phantoms of our imagination. When we let go of the ego and its rigid views, we dismantle the very walls of the room itself, allowing the fresh air and light of reality to pour in. The practice of letting go is the practice of mental and spiritual decluttering. It is not about becoming a blank slate or a mindless vacuum. It is about creating the inner conditions for our true nature, which is inherently open, creative, and compassionate, to finally have room to breathe and to express itself. This understanding of emptiness is the ground of ultimate freedom. Because things are empty of a fixed, inherent nature, they are pregnant with infinite possibility. A situation is not objectively bad. It is empty of any fixed quality, which means we have the freedom to respond to it from a place of wisdom rather than reaction. We are not inherently an anxious person or a failure. We are empty of any fixed, permanent identity, which means we have the freedom to change, to grow, and to learn at every moment. Emptiness is not a nihilistic abyss. It is the open canvas upon which any life, any reality, any masterpiece can be painted. It is the ultimate permission to be free. We have now journeyed to the philosophical heart of our exploration. We have seen that letting go of our attachments, our fears, and our rigid ideas is not just a psychological trick for feeling better. It is an alignment with the fundamental nature of reality itself. It is the wisdom of flowing with the great river of interbeing and impermanence rather than fighting against it. But a view of reality, no matter how profound or beautiful, remains just an idea until it is embodied, until it becomes a lived experience. The final challenge, and the greatest opportunity, is to take these profound insights and weave them into the very fabric of our day-to-day lives. How do we make letting go not just a concept we understand, but a continuous way of being? Our journey now moves from the heights of philosophy to the rich and fertile ground of our daily practice, exploring how every single moment can become an opportunity to let go. We have journeyed to the philosophical depths of our being, exploring the profound truths of impermanence, no self, and the creative emptiness that underlies all existence. We have seen that letting go is not simply a psychological technique for stress relief, but a radical alignment with the very nature of reality. But a map, no matter how accurate or beautiful, is not the territory itself. The ultimate purpose of this wisdom is not for it to remain a collection of elegant ideas in the mind, but for it to become a lived, embodied reality in our hearts and in our actions. The final and most important step in our journey is to learn how to weave these insights into the very fabric of our daily lives, to close the gap between the meditation cushion and the morning commute, and to make letting go not a momentous decision, but a continuous, moment-to-moment way of being. Our greatest teacher in this endeavor is always with us. It requires no special equipment, no quiet room, no designated time. It is the breath. The simple, rhythmic, life-sustaining breath is a constant, embodied lesson in the art of letting go. Observe its nature. The in-breath is an act of receiving. We draw in the air, the nourishment of the world, accepting the gift of life. It is an act of gentle taking in. And then, without any conscious effort, there is the release. The exhale is a natural surrender, a letting go of what is no longer needed, a release of the old to make way for the new. Every single breath we take is a complete cycle of receiving and releasing, of holding and letting go. We can consciously use this natural rhythm as our practice. With each in-breath, we can feel ourselves arriving in the present moment. With each out-breath, we can mentally release a piece of tension from our body, a worried thought from our mind, a flicker of resentment from our heart. The breath becomes our portable sanctuary, our constant reminder that the essence of living is a graceful flow of taking in and letting go. With the breath as our anchor, we can begin to transform the most mundane activities of our lives into profound practices of mindfulness. Consider the simple act of walking. Most of the time, we walk to get somewhere. Our minds lost in thought, our bodies on autopilot. But we can practice mindful walking. We can bring our attention to the simple, physical sensation of our feet making contact with the earth. We can feel the heel striking the ground, the weight rolling through the foot, the toes pushing off. Each step becomes an act of arrival in the here and now. Or consider the act of drinking a cup of tea. Instead of gulping it down while scrolling on a phone, we can transform it into a 5-minute meditation. We can notice the warmth of the cup in our hands. We can see the color and the steam. We can inhale its aroma. We can take a sip and truly taste it, feeling the warmth spread through our body. By bringing our full attention to this simple act, we are letting go of the mental chatter and arriving fully in our life. The kitchen sink, the shower, the act of listening to a friendivery moment becomes an opportunity to let go of distraction and be present. There is a beautiful analogy for this process of integration, found in the learning of a musical instrument. When a person first learns to play the piano or the guitar, they are full of tension and rigid control. Their mind is intensely focused on every detail. Place this finger here, press down this hard, now move to the next chord. The result is often clunky, effortful, and soulless. It is a product of intense, conscious striving. This is like our initial attempts at practice. We are trying very hard to be mindful, trying to let go. But observe a master musician. They are the picture of relaxation and ease. Their hands seem to dance across the instrument. They are no longer thinking about the individual notes in the same way. Through thousands of hours of consistent practice, the technique has become completely embodied. They have let go of the need for tight, conscious control. And because of this surrender, something magical happens. The music flows through them. They have become an open channel for its expression. This is the goal of our practice. Through consistent, gentle, and patient application, the techniques of letting go cease to be techniques at all. They become second nature. We no longer have to try to be present. We simply find ourselves being present more often. We no longer have to try to let go of anger. We simply find that the anger doesn't have the same grip on us that it once did. Like the musician, we let go of the rigid control and allow life to flow through us with more grace, ease, and harmony. This happens not through one great effort, but through 1,000 small moments of practice. To support this integration, it can be helpful to create simple rituals of release that bookend our days. In the morning, before reaching for the phone, we can take just 3 conscious breaths. We can set a simple intention for the day not to be perfect, but to meet our experience with as much awareness and kindness as we can muster. It is a way of starting the day from a place of spaciousness, rather than from a place of frantic doing. In the evening, before sleep, we can create a ritual of release. We can take a few minutes to mentally scan through the day, not with judgment, but with gentle observation. We can acknowledge the moments of joy and the moments of difficulty. We can recognize the things we wish we had done differently. And then, with a conscious out-breath, we can practice letting the entire day go its successes, its failures, its conversations, its worries. We wipe the slate clean, allowing the mind to rest in a state of peace, unburdened by the weight of a day that is already over. It is absolutely essential to remember that this is a practice, not a performance. There will be days, perhaps many of them, when we feel completely lost. We will be caught in reactivity. We will cling fiercely to our opinions. We will be swept away by our anxieties, and we will forget every beautiful insight we have ever had. These moments are not failures. They are not evidence that the practice isn't working. They are, in fact, an integral part of the path. The true practice lies in what you do the moment you realize you have been lost. The art is in beginning again. That moment of waking up, of recognizing, "Ah, I have been caught," is a moment of pure mindfulness. In that moment, the invitation is not to scold or shame ourselves, but to offer ourselves a dose of compassion, to smile gently at our shared human frailty, and to simply, tenderly, begin again. We return our attention to the breath. We return to the present moment. The entire spiritual path can be described as a continuous series of these gentle, compassionate returns. By weaving these simple, mindful anchors and rituals into the fabric of our existence, the profound wisdom of letting go moves from the philosophical to the experiential. It ceases to be a grand, abstract project and becomes as intimate and as natural as the feeling of our own breath, rising and falling. After this long and deep journey from seeing our chains clearly, to understanding the nature of reality, to learning how to integrate this wisdom into our lives, we can now pause. We can take a moment to look back at the path we have traveled, and to look forward at the fruits that grow from this fertile ground of surrender. What is the harvest of a life lived with an open hand? We have traveled a long and winding path together. Our journey began with the simple, universal image of a clenched fist, a symbol of the quiet struggle and tension that defines so much of our lives. We set out not to gain a new skill or to add another layer of knowledge to our minds, but to learn the sacred and often counterintuitive art of letting go. We have faced the shadows of our own minds, seeking not to banish them, but to understand them, and in understanding, to release their power over us. Now, having walked through the landscapes of past and future, having met the ego, having explored the nature of reality itself, we arrive at the harvest. It is time to pause, to look back with clarity, and to appreciate the profound and beautiful fruits that grow from the fertile soil of surrender. We began by identifying the chains that bind us, the subtle but powerful force of clinging, or upadana. We saw how we cling to the ghosts of the past, trapping ourselves in prisons of regret and resentment. We saw how we cling to the phantoms of the future, living in a state of chronic anxiety and what if. We turned our gaze inward and dared to question the very I who was doing all this clinging, discovering that our solid ego was more like a fleeting mirage. We examined our attachments to the material world, to our most deeply held opinions, and even to the very relationships that define us. We learned that resisting the universal law of impermanence is the source of our suffering, and that true freedom lies in learning to flow with the river of life, not in trying to dam it. We practiced observing our own minds without judgment, and in that spaciousness, we discovered the warmth of compassion and the courageous strength of vulnerability. We have, in essence, been learning how to unclench the fist, finger by painful finger. And what happens when the fist is finally allowed to open? This is where we must redefine what it means to grow. Spiritual growth is not like building a skyscraper, adding more and more floors of knowledge and accomplishment to make ourselves taller and more impressive. It is more like tending a garden. It is a process of subtraction, of patiently removing the weeds of our conditioned habits, our attachments, our aversions, our delusions, so that the sunlight can reach the soil. The growth that comes from letting go is not the growth of the ego, it is the blossoming of our true nature. We do not become perfect, superhuman beings, immune to the pains of life. We become more fully and authentically human. We become more whole, more integrated, more capable of holding all of life's beautiful and terrible paradoxes with a spacious and open heart. The first and most immediate fruit of this practice is the emergence of a deep and abiding inner peace. This is not the fleeting happiness that comes from getting what we want, but a profound equanimity that is not dependent on external circumstances. It is the peace of the unshakable mountain, which is not disturbed by the changing winds of praise or blame, success or failure. When we are no longer attached to life being a certain way, we find a stillness at our core that is present even amidst the storms of life. This peace is not something we achieve. It is what remains when we have let go of everything that is not peace. From this ground of peace grows the fruit of resilience. life will still present us with challenges, with loss, and with pain. The practice of letting go does not grant us immunity from hardship. What it grants us is the ability to move through hardship without being shattered by it. We become like the bamboo, which bends in the wind but does not break. We become like the kintsugi bowl, our cracks mended with the gold of wisdom, making us stronger and more beautiful in the very places where we were broken. Because we are not clinging to a specific outcome, we are free to adapt, to learn, and to begin again with grace. As we let go of our need for approval and our project of trying to change others, the fruit of authentic relationships begins to ripen. We can love people for who they are, not for who we need them to be. We can communicate from a place of honesty rather than performance. We can offer the gift of our full presence, listening deeply without an agenda. Our connections become less about transaction and more about communion. We discover that true intimacy is not about finding the perfect person, but about bringing our most authentic and vulnerable self to the beautiful imperfection of human connection. And in the spaciousness created by letting go, the fruits of spontaneity and creativity appear. When the mind is no longer a cluttered room, filled with the heavy furniture of past regrets and future anxieties, there is space for something new to arise. We become less scripted, less predictable. We are more open to the surprises of the present moment, more able to respond to life with fresh eyes and a creative spirit. We find ourselves living with a lightness and a sense of playfulness that was impossible when we were so busy managing and controlling our lives. The ultimate harvest, the fruit that contains all the others, is a profound sense of freedom. This is not the political freedom to do whatever we want. It is a much deeper inner liberation. It is freedom from the tyranny of the endless cycle of craving and aversion. It is freedom from the exhausting, lifelong job of defending the fragile ego. It is freedom from the fear of uncertainty, and freedom from the prison of our own mind. It is the realization that the cage was always an illusion, and the door was always open. Think of a great tree in the heart of autumn. Its leaves, which were its source of life and glory all summer long, have turned brilliant shades of gold and crimson. And then, without a struggle, without any sense of loss or grief, the tree lets them go. It releases them gracefully to the wind, allowing them to fall and blanket the earth. The tree does not cling to its past glory. It does not fear the coming winter's emptiness. It has an innate wisdom. It trusts the process. It understands that this emptying, this great surrender, is not an ending, but a necessary and vital part of the cycle of life. It must let go of the old to make space for the new life that will burst forth in the spring. This is the final lesson. Our letting go is our autumn. It is the graceful release of all that has served its purpose, a necessary emptying that makes way for our own renewal, our own spring, our own growth. This surrender is not a passive act of weakness. It is a courageous and intelligent alignment with the very life force of the universe. It is the discovery that the ultimate strength is found not in holding on, but in the profound, generative, and sacred act of letting go. We have now walked this path from beginning to end, from the clenched fist of struggle to the open hand of surrender. We have examined the teachings and explored the practices. All that now remains is to gather the essence of this journey, to hold its most vital message in our hearts, and to carry its transformative wisdom forward into the sacred, ordinary moments of the rest of our lives. We began this journey together with the image of a clenched fist, a quiet symbol of the unconscious tension with which we so often hold our lives. We set out to understand the nature of this struggle, to trace the roots of our anxiety and our discontent. We have walked through the haunted galleries of the past and the anxious mirages of the future. We have looked into the very nature of the eye that clings, and we have touched the profound and liberating truths of impermanence, compassion, and the creative spaciousness that lies at the heart of our being. We have learned that our suffering comes not from life itself, but from our resistance to its ceaseless, unpredictable, and beautiful flow. We have shifted our aim from fighting the current to learning how to dance with it. Now, at the end of our exploration, we are left with a single, simple, and transformative truth. Peace is not a destination we must struggle to reach. It is not a prize to be won, an achievement to be unlocked, or a state to be acquired after years of effort. Peace is our original nature. It is the silent, spacious awareness that was here before our first thought and will be here after our last. It is the sky, forever unstained by the passing clouds of our experience. The practice of letting go, in all its forms, is not about adding anything to ourselves. It is a process of subtraction, of gently removing the layers of clinging, fear, and illusion that obscure the peace that is already and always within us. Surrender, we have learned, is not an act of defeat. It is the ultimate act of courage. It is not giving up on life, but giving up the war against life. It is the brave and intelligent decision to finally come home to ourselves. You do not need to embark on a grand spiritual project. You do not need to become someone other than who you are. The power to practice, the power to let go, is available to you right now, in this very moment. It resides in your next breath. As you inhale, you can receive this moment just as it is. And as you exhale, you can let go. Can you let go of the small knot of tension in your shoulders? Can you release, just for a second, the worry about what comes next? Can you soften your grip on a single resentment you have been carrying? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and the journey to a life of peace begins with a single, gentle act of letting go. The fist does not need to be forced open. It only needs to be reminded, with kindness and patience, that it is safe to finally, gently open